Chapter 18. Our Mother's Surprise. Each day of the 10 that passed before Mama visited us again, Chris and I speculated for hours on end just why she had gone away to Europe and stayed so long, and most of all, what was the big news she had to tell us. We thought of those 10 days as just another form of punishment. For punishment was what it was, and it hurt to know she was in this same house, and yet she could ignore us and shut us out, as if we were only mice in the attic. So when she showed up at long last, we were thoroughly chastised, and most fearful she would never come back if Chris and I showed more hostility or repeated our demands to be let out. We were quiet, timid, and accepting of our fate. But what would we do if she never returned? We couldn't escape by using the ladder made of torn-up sheets, not when the twins went hysterical just to be on the roof. So we smiled at Mama and uttered not one word of complaint. We didn't ask why she had punished us again by staying away 10 days when already she'd been gone for months. We accepted what she was willing to give us. We were, as she had told us she had learned to be with her father, her dutiful, obedient, and passive children. And what's more, she liked us this way. We were again her sweet, her loving, her private darlings. Since we were so good, so sweet, so approving of her now, and so very respectful, and apparently trusting, this was the time she chose to drop her bombshell. "Darlings, rejoice for me. I am so happy." She laughed and spun around in a circle, hugging her arms over her chest, loving her own body, or so it seemed to me. "Guess what happened? Go on, guess." Chris and I glanced at each other. "Our grandfather has died," he said cautiously, while my heart was doing pirouettes, preparing to really leap and bound if she gave us the glad tidings. "No," she said sharply, as if her happiness had dimmed some. "He's been taken to the hospital," said I, guessing second best. "No, I really don't hate him now, so I wouldn't come to you and say I was rejoicing over his death." "Why don't you just tell us your good news, then?" I said dully. "We'll never be able to guess. We don't know much about your life anymore." She ignored what I implied and rhapsodized on. "The reason I was gone for so long, and what I found so difficult to explain, I've married a wonderful man, an attorney named Bart Winslow. You're going to like him. He's going to love all of you. He's dark-haired and so handsome and tall and athletic, and he loves to ski like you do, Christopher, and he plays tennis, and he's brilliant like you are, darling." And she was looking at Chris, of course. "He's charming, and everybody likes him, even my father. And we went to Europe on our honeymoon, and the gifts I brought to you all came from England, France, Spain, or Italy." And on she raved about her new husband while Chris and I sat silent. Since the night of the Christmas party, Chris and I had voiced our suspicions many times. For as young as we had been back then, we were wise enough to know that a beautiful young woman who was as needing of a man as our mother was not likely to remain a widow for long. But still, almost 2 years passed without a wedding, and that had given us reason enough to believe that the handsome, dark-haired man with the big moustache was of no real importance to Mama, just a passing fancy, one suitor amongst many. And deep down in our foolish hearts, we had convinced ourselves that she was going to be ever faithful, ever devoted to our dead father, our blonde and blue-eyed Grecian godfather, whom she had to love beyond reason to have done what she did, marry a man so closely related. I closed my eyes to try and shut out her hateful voice, telling us of another man who was taking our father's place. Now she was another man's wife, a totally different kind of man, and he'd been in her bed and sleeping with her now, and we'd see even less of her than we had. Oh, dear God, how long, how long? Her news and her voice gave birth to a little gray bird of panic that fluttered wild in the cage of my ribs, wanting out, out, out. "Please," Mama begged, as smiles and laughter, joy and happiness all struggling to survive in the bleak, sterile air of our reception to her news. "Try and understand and be happy for me. I loved your father, you know that. But he's gone, and been gone for so long, and I need someone else to love, and someone to love me. I saw Chris open his mouth to say he loved her, that we all loved her, but then he tightened his lips, realizing, as I did, that love from her children wasn't the kind of love she was speaking about. And I didn't love her anymore. I wasn't even sure I liked her now, but I could smile and pretend and say the words just so the twins would not be frightened by my expression. "Yes, Mama, I'm glad for you. It's nice you found someone to love you again." "He's been in love with me for a long time, Kathy," she rushed on, encouraged and smiling with confidence again, "though he did have his mind set on being a bachelor. It wasn't easy to convince him he needed a wife. And your grandfather never wanted me to marry a second time, just as another punishment for the evil I did when I married your father. But he likes Bart, and when I kept on begging and begging, he finally relented and said, yes, that I could marry Bart and still inherit." She paused to chew on her lower lip. Then she swallowed nervously. Her beringed fingers fluttered to her throat to nervously work the string of genuine pearls she wore, and thus betrayed all the ways of a woman in distress who could smile even so. "Of course, I don't love Bart as much as I did your father." Ha! How weakly she said this. Her glowing eyes and radiant complexion betrayed a love that loomed larger than any she'd known before, and I sighed. Poor Daddy. "The gifts you brought us, Mama, they weren't all from Europe or the British Isles. That box of maple sugar candy came from Vermont. Did you go to Vermont, too? Is that where he's from?" Her laughter came with lilting joy, uninhibited and even a little sensual, as if Vermont had given her much. "No, he isn't from Vermont, Kathy, but he has a sister living there, and we visited her for a weekend after we came from Europe, and that's where I bought the box of candy, for I know how much you love maple sugar candy. He has 2 other sisters living down south. He's from some little town in South Carolina, Glenna, or something like that. But he stayed so long in New England, where he graduated from Harvard Law School, that he sounds more like a Yankee than a Southerner. And, oh, it is so beautiful in Vermont in the autumn. It absolutely took my breath away. Of course, when you're on your honeymoon, you don't want to be with other people. So we visited his sister and her family only a short while, and then spent some time on the seashore." She flicked her eyes uneasily at the twins, and again her pearls were twisted, so likely they'd break any second. Apparently, genuine pearls are more strongly strung than the simulated kind. "Did you like the little boats I brought you, Corey?" "Yes, ma'am," he answered very politely, staring at her with his large, shadowed eyes, just as if she were a stranger. "Carrie, sweetheart, the little dolls. I picked those up for you in England to add to your collection. I hope to find you another cradle, but they don't seem even to make dollhouse cradles anymore." "It's all right, Mama," answered Carrie, her eyes on the floor. "Chris and Kathy made me a cradle out of cardboard, and I like it fine." Oh, God, didn't she see? They didn't know her now. They felt uncomfortable with her now. "Does your new husband know about us?" I asked, dead serious. Chris glowered at me for asking, telling me mutely that of course our mother wouldn't be deceitful and not tell the man she'd married that she had 4 hidden children, that some considered the devil's issue. Shadows came to darken and pain Mama's happiness. Again I had asked a wrong question. "Not yet, Kathy. But just as soon as Daddy dies, I'll tell him about you 4. I'll explain in minute detail. He'll understand. He's kind and gentle. You're going to like him." She had already said that more than once. And here was another thing that had to wait until an old man died. "Kathy, stop looking at me like that. I couldn't tell Bart before our marriage. He's your grandfather's attorney. I couldn't let him know about my children, not yet, not until the will is read and I have the money in my name." Words were on the tip of my tongue to say a man should know when his wife had 4 children by her first husband. Ooh, how I wanted to say this. But Chris was glaring meanly at me, and the twins were huddled over, crouching small with their large eyes fixed on the TV set. And I didn't know if I should speak or stay silent. At least when you were silent, you didn't make any new enemies. Maybe she was right, too. God, let her be right. Let my faith be renewed. Let me believe in her again. Let me believe that she is not just beautiful on the surface, but all the way through. God didn't reach down and lay a warm, reassuring hand on my shoulder. I sat there, realizing my suspicions were stretching the cord between her and me very, very fine. Love. How often that word came up in books. Over and over again. If you had wealth and health and beauty and talent, you had nothing if you didn't have love. Love changed all that was ordinary into something giddy, powerful, drunken, enchanted. Thus ran the course of my thoughts on a day early in winter, when rain pelted on the roof and the twins sat on the floor in the bedroom before the TV. Chris and I were in the attic, lying side by side on the old mattress, near the window in the schoolroom, reading together one of the antique books Mama had brought up from the big library downstairs. Soon the attic would again turn Arctic winter, so we spent as much time up there as possible now while we still could. Chris liked to scan a page and then quickly leap to another. I liked to dawdle over the beautiful lines, going back to read through them twice, sometimes 3 times. We argued incessantly about this. Read faster, Kathy. You try to absorb the words. Today he was patient. He turned his back and stared up at the ceiling while I took my time, pursuing each beautifully written line and soaking up the feel of Victorian times when people wore such fancy clothes and spoke in such elegant ways and felt so deeply about love. From paragraph 1, the story had captivated both of us with its mystical, romantic charm. Each slow page spinning out an involved tale of star-crossed lovers named Lily and Raymond, who had to overcome monumental obstacles to find and stand upon the magic place of purple grass where all dreams are fulfilled. God, how I wanted them to find that place. Then I discovered the tragedy of their lives. All along they had stood on the purple grass. Can you imagine? On that special grass all the time, and they never looked down even once to see it. I hated unhappy endings. I slammed that hateful book shut and hurled it against the nearest wall. If that isn't the most stupid, silly, ridiculous story, I raged at Chris, as if he had written the book. No matter whom I love, I learn to forgive and forget. I continued to rail along with the storm outside, the weather and me beating out the same crescendo. Now, why couldn't it have been written differently? How is it possible for 2 intelligent people to float along with their heads in the clouds, not realizing happenstance can always bring about bad luck? Never, never am I going to be like Lily or Raymond either. Idealistic fools who don't know enough to look down at the ground on occasion. My brother seemed amused that I took a story so seriously, but then he reconsidered and stared thoughtfully at the driving rain. Perhaps lovers aren't supposed to look down at the ground. That kind of story is told in symbols, and earth represents reality, and reality represents frustrations, chance, illnesses, death, murder, and all kinds of other tragedies. Lovers are meant to look up at the sky, for up there no beautiful illusions can be trampled upon. Frowning, sulky, I gazed moodily at him. And when I fall in love, I began, I will build a mountain to touch the sky. Then my lover and I will have the best of both worlds, reality firmly under our feet, while we have our heads in the clouds with all our illusions still intact. And the purple grass will grow all around, high enough to reach our eyes. He laughed, he hugged me, he kissed me lightly, tenderly, and his eyes were so gentle and soft in the murky, cold gloom of the attic. Oh, yes, my Kathy could do that. Keep all her fanciful illusions, dancing eye-high in purple grass, wearing clouds for gossamer clothes. She'd leap, she'd bound and pirouette, until her clumsy-footed, awkward lover was dancing too, just as gracefully. Put on quicksand, I quickly jumped to where I was sure-footed. It was a beautiful story, though, in its own peculiar way. I feel so sorry that Lily and Raymond had to take their own lives when it should have worked out differently. When Lily told Raymond the full truth, how she was virtually raped by that awful man, Raymond shouldn't have accused her of seducing him. Nobody in their right mind would want to seduce a man with 8 children. Oh, Kathy, sometimes really you are just too much. His voice sounded deeper than usual when he said that. His soft look traveled slowly over my face, lingering on my lips, then down to my bosom, to my legs sheathed in white leotards. Over the leotards I wore a short wool skirt and a wool cardigan sweater. Then his eyes moved upward again, coming to lock with my surprised look. He flushed as I kept on staring at him, and turned aside his face for the second time today. I was close enough to hear his heart drumming fast, faster, racing. And all of a sudden my own heart caught the rhythm of his in the only tempo hearts can have, thumpity-bump, thumpity-bump. He shot me a quick glance. Our eyes melded and held. He laughed nervously, trying to hide and pretend none of this could possibly be serious. You were right the first time, Kathy. It was a stupid, silly story. Ridiculous. Only insane people would die for the sake of love. I'll bet you 100 to 1 a woman wrote that junky romantic trash. Just a minute ago, I'd despised that author for bringing about such a miserable ending. Then there I went, rushing to the defense. T.M. Ellis could very well have been a man, though I doubt any woman writer in the 19th century had much chance of being published unless she used her initials or a man's name. And why is it all men think everything a woman writes is trivial or trashy, or just plain silly drivel? Don't men have romantic notions? Don't men dream of finding the perfect love? And it seems to me that Raymond was far more mushy-minded than Lily. Don't ask me what men are like, he stormed with such bitterness he didn't seem himself at all. He raged on. Up here, living as we do, how am I ever going to know how it feels to be a man? Up here, I'm not allowed to have any romantic notions. It's don't do this and don't do that, and keep your eyes averted, and don't see what's before your very eyes, gliding about, showing off, pretending I'm just a brother without feelings, without any emotions but childish ones. It seems some stupid girls think a gonna-be doctor is without sexuality. My eyes widened. Such a vehement outburst from one seldom upset took me completely by surprise. In all our lives he'd never spoken so fervently to me, and with such anger. No, I was the sour lemon, the bad apple in the barrel of good. I'd contaminated him. He was acting now like he had when Mama went away and stayed so long. Oh, it was wicked of me to make him the troublesome thing I was. He should stay always what he was, the happy-go-lucky, cheerful optimist. Had I robbed him of his greatest asset besides his good looks and charm? I put out my hand to touch his forearm. Chris, I whispered, near tears, I think I know exactly what you need to feel manly. Yeah, he bit out. What can you do? Now he wouldn't even look at me. Instead, he fixed his gaze on the ceiling above. I ached for him. I knew what had him down. He was letting go of his dream for my benefit so he could be like me and not care whether or not we inherited a fortune. And to be like me, he had to be sour, bitter, hating everyone and suspicious of their hidden motives. Tentatively, I reached out to touch his hair. A haircut, that's what you need. Your hair is much too long and pretty. To feel a man, you must have shorter hair. Right now, your hair looks like mine. And who has ever said your hair is pretty? He asked in the tightest of voices. Maybe once you had pretty hair before the tarring. Really? It seemed I could recall many times his eyes had told me my hair was more than just pretty. And I could recall the way he looked when he picked up the shiny shears to cut off that front hair, so delicate and brittle. He was snipping with such reluctance it seemed he was cutting off fingers and not just hair that didn't feel pain. Then one day I caught him sitting in the attic sunshine, holding the long lengths of cut-off hair in his hands. He'd sniffed it, then put it to his cheek and then to his lips, and then he hid it away in a box to keep under his pillow. Not easily could I force laughter to deceive him and not let him know I'd seen. Oh, Christopher Doll, you have the most expressive blue eyes. When we are free of this place and out in the world, I pity all the girls who are going to fall for you. Most especially, I'll feel sorry for your wife, with such a handsome husband to charm all his beautiful patients into wanting affairs. And if I were your wife, I'd kill you if you even had one extramarital affair. I'd love you so much, I'd be so jealous. I might even make you retire from medicine at age 35. I never told you even once your hair was pretty, he said sharply, ignoring everything I'd said. Ever so lightly I stroked his cheek, feeling the whiskers that needed shaving off. Sit right where you are. I'll run for the scissors. You know I haven't given you a haircut for the longest time. Why should I bother cutting his hair and Corey's when the way our hair looked didn't seem important to our lifestyle? Not since we came had Carrie and I had our hair trimmed. Only the top of mine had been snipped off to signify our submission to a mean old woman made of steel. And while I raced for the scissors, I thought how odd it was that none of our green plants would grow, yet each of us grew lots of hair. It seemed in all the fairy tales I'd read, the damsels in distress always had long, long blonde hair. Had any brunette ever been locked away in a turret? If an attic could be considered a turret. Chris sat on the floor. I knelt behind him, and though his hair hung below his shoulders, he didn't want much taken off. Now go easy with those shears, he ordered nervously. Don't cut off too much all at once. Feeling manly too suddenly on a rainy afternoon in the attic just might be dangerous, he teased and grinned, and then he was laughing with a brilliant show of even white teeth. I had charmed him back to how he should be. Oh, I did love him as I crawled around and earnestly snipped and trimmed. Constantly I had to move backward for perspective to check and see if his hair hung evenly, for most certainly I wouldn't want to make his head lopsided. I held his hair with a comb, as I'd seen barbers do, and I carefully snipped beneath that comb, not daring to take off more than 1/4 of an inch a clip. I had a mental vision of how I wanted him to look, like someone I admired very much. And when I'd finished, I brushed the bright hair snippings from his shoulders and leaned back to see that I hadn't done a bad job at all. There, I said in triumph, pleased with my unexpected mastery of what seemed to be a difficult art. Not only do you look exceptionally handsome, but extremely manly as well. Though, of course, you have been manly all along. It's a pity you didn't know it. I thrust the silver-backed mirror with my initials into his hands. This mirror represented 1/3 of the sterling silver set Mama had given me on my last birthday. Brush, comb, mirror, all 3 to be hidden away so the grandmother wouldn't know I had expensive items of vanity and pride. Chris stared and stared into that mirror, and my heart faltered as he looked for a moment displeased and undecided. Then, slowly, a wide grin lit up his face. My God, you've made me look like a blonde Prince Valiant. At first I didn't like it, but now I see you changed his style just a bit so it isn't squared off. You've curved it and layered it to flatter my face like a loving cup. Thank you, Catherine Doll. I had no idea you were so skilled at cutting hair. I have many skills you don't know about. I'm beginning to suspect that. And Prince Valiant should be so lucky as to look like my handsome, manly, blonde brother, I teased, and couldn't help but admire my own artistry. Oh, golly gee, what a heartbreaker he'd be one day. He still had the mirror, and casually he laid it aside, and before I knew what he was about, like a cat, he pounced. He wrestled with me, bearing me back to the floor, and reached for the scissors at the same time. He yanked them from my hand and then grabbed a handful of my hair. Now, my lovely, let's see if I can't do the same thing for you. Terrified, I yelped. I thrust him away so he fell backward, and I jumped to my feet. No one was going to shear off 1/8 of an inch of my hair. Maybe it was too fine and too thin now, and maybe it wasn't as sensational as it used to be, but it was all the hair I had, and prettier even now than what most girls had. I took off on the run from the schoolroom. I raced through the doorway and into the immense attic, dodging behind posts, circling old trunks, leaping over low tables, and bounding over sheet-shrouded sofas and chairs. The paper flowers fanned frantically as I ran, and he chased. The flames of the low-fat candles that we kept burning during the day, just to cheer up and warm up a dreary, vast and cold place, bent low in our wakes and almost guttered. And no matter how swiftly I ran or how cleverly I dodged, I couldn't shake off my pursuer. I threw a glance over my shoulder, and I couldn't even recognize his face, and that scared me even more. Lunging forward, he made an effort to seize hold of my long hair, which bannered out behind me, and seemed so very intent on cutting it off. Did he hate me now? Why had he spent one entire day so devotedly trying to save my hair, only to cut off my crowning glory for the sheer fun of it? I fled back toward the schoolroom, planning on reaching there first. Then I'd slam the door and lock it, and he'd come to his senses and realize the absurdity of it all. Perhaps he sensed my purpose and put some extra speed into his longer legs. He bounded forward and caught hold of my long, streaming locks, causing me to scream as I tripped and fell forward. Not only did I fall, but he fell too, straight on top of me. A sharp pain pierced my side. I screamed again, not in terror this time, but in shock. He was over me, supported by his hands on the floor, staring down into my face, his face deadly white and frightened. "Are you hurt? Oh, God, Kathy, are you all right?" Was I all right? Was I? Lifting my head, I stared down at the heavy flow of blood quickly staining my sweater. Chris saw it too. His blue eyes went stark, bleak, wild, distraught. With trembling fingers, he began to unbutton my sweater so he could spread it open and take a look at my wound. "Oh, Lord," he breathed, then expelled a low whistle of relief. "Wow! Thank God! I was so scared it would be a puncture. A deep puncture would be serious, but it's only a long cut, Kathy. Nasty, and you're losing a lot of blood. Now don't move a muscle. Stay right where you are, and I'll dash down to the bath and fetch medicine and bandages." He kissed me first on the cheek, then was up and in a terrible hurry, racing madly toward the stairwell, whereas I thought I could have gone with him and saved time. Yet the twins were down there, and they'd see the blood, and all they had to do was see blood, and they'd go to pieces and scream. In a few minutes, Chris came speeding back with our medical emergency kit. He fell down on his knees beside me, his hands still glistening with water from a fast scrub-up. He was in too much of a hurry to dry them well. I was fascinated to see he knew so precisely what to do. First, he folded a heavy towel and used that to press down hard on the long cut. Looking very serious and intent, he bore down on the pad, checking every few seconds to see if the bleeding had stopped. When it did, he busied himself with antiseptic that stung like fire and hurt worse than the injury itself. "I know it stings, Kathy. Can't help that. Have to put it on to avoid infection. Wish I had sutures, but maybe it won't make a permanent scar, and I pray it doesn't. It would be so nice if people could go through all of their life without ever cutting into the perfect envelope they're born with. And here I am, the first one to really scar your skin. You had died because of me, and you could have if the shears had been slanted differently, then I would want to die too." He had finished playing doctor, and was now winding the remaining gauze up in a neat roll before replacing it in the blue wrapping paper and into a box. He stashed away the adhesive, closed the kit. Leaning above me, his face hovered over mine, his serious eyes so delving, worried, and intense. His blue eyes were like the eyes we all had, yet on this rainy day they were catching colors from the paper flowers, making them limpid, dark pools of iridescence. A lump came in my throat as I wondered where the boy was I used to know. Where was that brother? And who was this young man with the blonde whiskers, staring so long into my eyes? Just that look of his held me in thrall. And greater than any pain or ache or hurt I ever felt before or since was the pain caused me by the suffering I saw in the shifting kaleidoscopic rainbowed colors of his tortured eyes. "Chris," I murmured, feeling unreal, "don't look like that. It wasn't your fault." I cupped his face in my palms first, then drew his head down to my breast as I'd seen Mama do in the past. "It's only a scratch. Doesn't hurt a bit, though it hurt dreadfully. And I know you didn't do it deliberately." Hoarsely he choked. "Why did you run?" "Because you ran, I had to chase. And I was only teasing. I wouldn't cut one strand from your head. It was just something to do, to have fun. And you were wrong when you said I thought your hair was pretty. It's more than just pretty. I think you may grow on your head the most glorious hair in the world." A little knife twisted in my heart as he lifted his head long enough to spread my hair fan-like and cover my bare breast. I could hear him breathing deeply my scent. We lay there quietly, listening to the winter rain drumming on the slate roof not so far above. Deep silence, all around, always silence. Nature's voices were the only ones to reach us in the attic, and so seldom did nature speak in friendly, soft tones. The rain on the roof pitter-pattered down into only drops, and the sun came out and shone down on us to shimmer his hair and mine like long, glimmering strands of silken diamonds. "Look," I said to Chris, "one of the slats from a western window shutter has fallen out." "Nice," he said, sounding sleepy and content. "Now we'll have sun where once there was none. See, I've made a rhyme." And then in a sleepy whisper he said, "I'm thinking of Raymond and Lily and their quest for the purple grass where all dreams are fulfilled." "Were you?" "In a way, I was kind of thinking the same thing," I answered, whispery too. Over and over again I twirled a strand of his hair around my thumb, pretending not to notice that one of his hands was ever so cautiously stroking my breast, the one his face didn't cover. Because I didn't object, he dared to kiss the nipple. I jumped, startled, wondering why that should feel so strange and so extraordinarily thrilling. What was a nipple but a tannish, pink little peak? "I can picture Raymond kissing Lily just where you kissed," I went on breathlessly, wanting him to stop and wanting him to go on. "But I can't imagine them doing what comes next." Words to make his head pop up. Just the right words to make him look at me intensely again, with strange lights flickering in his eyes which wouldn't stay only one color. "Kathy, do you know what comes next?" A blush heated my face. "Yes, I know, sort of. Do you know?" He laughed, one of those dry chuckles you read about in novels. "Sure I know. My very first day in school I was told in the boys' restroom. That's all the older boys could talk about. They had 4-letter words on the walls that I didn't understand, but they were soon explained in detail. Girls, baseball, girls, football, girls, girls, girls were all they could talk about, and all the ways they were different from us. It's a fascinating subject for most boys, and I suppose men." "But not fascinating for you?" "Me? I don't think about girls or sex, though I wish to God you weren't so damned pretty. And it would help if you weren't always so near and so available." "Then you do think about me? You do think I'm pretty?" A smothered groan escaped his lips, more like a moan. He bolted up to sit straight, staring down at what my open sweater revealed, for the fan of my hair was displaced. If I hadn't cut off the top of my leotards, he wouldn't be seeing so much, but I had had to cut off the two small bodice. With trembling, clumsy fingers, he fastened the buttons of my sweater, keeping his eyes averted from mine. "Get this straight in your head, Kathy. Of course you're pretty, but brothers don't think about sisters as girls, nor do they feel any sort of emotion for them other than tolerance and brotherly affection, and sometimes hate." "I hope God strikes me dead this second if you hate me, Christopher." His hands lifted to cover his face, hiding. And when he came out from behind the shield, he was smiling, cheerful, clearing his throat. "Come on. It's time we went down to the twins before they burn their eyes into black holes from staring at the boob tube for so long." It hurt to rise, though he assisted me up. In his arms I was held close while my cheek was pressed against his heart. And though he would put me from him quickly, I clung tighter. "Chris, what we did just now, was it sinful?" Again he cleared his throat. "If you think so, then it was." What kind of answer was that? If thoughts of sin stayed out of it, those moments lying on the floor when he touched me so tenderly, with magical tingling fingers and lips, were the sweetest moments since we'd come to live in this abominable house. I looked up to see what he was thinking and saw that strange look in his eyes. Paradoxically, he seemed happier, sadder, older, younger, wiser. Or was it he was feeling a man now? And if he was, then I was glad, sinful or not. We walked hand in hand down the steps to the Twins, where Corey was plucking a tune on the banjo while keeping his eyes glued to the TV. He picked up the guitar and began his own composition as Carrie chanted simple lyrics he'd composed. The banjo was for happy tunes, to move your feet. This melody was like rain on the roof, long, dreary, monotonous. Gonna see the sun, gonna find my home, gonna feel the wind, see the sun again. I sat on the floor near Corey and took the guitar from his hands, for I could play a bit too. He had taught me how, taught us all how. And I sang to him that special, wistful song that belonged to Dorothy in the movie The Wizard of Oz, a movie that the Twins adored every time they saw it. And when I had finished singing of bluebirds that flew over the rainbow, Corey asked, "Don't you like my song, Kathy?" "You bet I like your song, but it's so sad. How about writing a few happy lyrics with a little hope?" The little mouse was in his pocket, just his tail poking out as he fingered down there for breadcrumbs. Mickey made a twisting movement, and then his head was out of the shirt pocket, and in his forefeet he held a bit of bread and daintily began to nibble. The look on Corey's face as he stared down at his first pet touched me so deeply I had to turn away to keep from crying. "Kathy, you know, Mama, she never said nothing about my pet." "She hasn't noticed him, Corey." "Why don't she notice?" I sighed, not really knowing who and what my mother was anymore, except a stranger we used to love. Death wasn't the only thing that took away someone you loved and needed. I knew that now. "Mama's got a new husband," said Chris brightly, "and when you're in love you don't see anyone's happiness but your own. Soon enough she'll notice you've got a friend." Carrie was staring at my sweater. "Kathy, what's that stuff on your sweater?" "Paint," said I, without the slightest hesitation. "Chris was trying to teach me how to paint, and he got mad when my picture was better than anything he's ever done, so he picked up the little pan with red and he threw it at me." My older brother sat there with the darndest look on his face. "Chris, can Kathy paint better than you can?" "If she says she can, then she must." "Where is her painting?" "In the attic." "I want to see it." "Then you go up and get it. I'm tired. I want to look at TV while Kathy prepares dinner." He shot me a swift look. "My dear sister, would you mind, for the sake of propriety, putting on a clean sweater before we sit down to eat dinner? There's something about that red paint that makes me feel guilty." "It looks like blood," said Corey. "It's stiff, like blood when you don't wash it off." "Poster colors," said Chris, as I left to go into the bath to change into a sweater many sizes too large. "Poster colors stiffen up." Satisfied, Corey began to tell Chris of how he'd missed seeing dinosaurs. "Chris, they were bigger than this house. They came up out of the water and swallowed the boat and 2 men. I knew you'd be sorry to miss seeing that." "Yeah," said Chris dreamily. "I sure would have liked to have seen that." That night I felt strangely ill at ease and restless, and my thoughts kept returning to the way Chris had looked at me in the attic. I knew then what the secret was I'd been searching so long to find, that secret button that switched on love, physical, sexual desire. It wasn't just the viewing of naked bodies, for many a time I'd bathed Corey and seen Chris naked, and I'd never felt any particular arousal, because what he and Corey had was different from what Carrie and I had. It wasn't being naked at all. It was the eyes. The secret of love was in the eyes. The way one person looked at another, the way eyes communicated and spoke when the lips never moved. Chris's eyes had said more than 10,000 words. And it wasn't just the way he touched me, caressingly, tenderly. It was the way he touched when he looked as he did. And that's why the grandmother made it a rule that we shouldn't look at the other sex. Oh, to think that old witch knew the secret of love. She couldn't ever have loved. No, not her, the iron-hearted, the steel-spined. Never could her eyes have been soft. And then, as I delved deeper into the subject, it was more than the eyes. It was what was behind the eyes, in the brain, wanting to please you, make you happy, give you joy, and take away the loneliness of never having anyone understand as you wanted to be understood. Sin had nothing at all to do with love, real love. I turned my head and saw that Chris was awake too, curled up on his side, staring over at me. He smiled the sweetest smile, and I could have cried for him, for me. Our mother didn't visit us that day, nor had she visited us the day before, but we'd found a way to cheer ourselves by playing Corey's instruments and singing along. Despite the absence of a mother grown very negligent, we all went to bed more hopefully that night. Singing happy songs for several hours had convinced us all that sun, love, home, and happiness were just around the bend, and our long days of traveling through a deep, dark forest were almost over. Into my bright dreams crept something dark and terrifying. Every day forms took on monstrous proportions. With my eyes closed, I saw the grandmother steal into the bedroom, and thinking me asleep, she shaved off all my hair. I screamed, but she didn't hear me. Nobody heard me. She took a long and shiny knife and sliced off my breasts and fed them into Chris's mouth. And there was more. I tossed, writhed, and made small whimpering sounds that awakened Chris, as the twins slept on as children dead and buried. Sleepily, Chris stumbled over to sit on my bed and asked as he fumbled to find my hand, "Another nightmare?" No, this was no ordinary nightmare. This was precognition and psychic in nature. I felt it in my bone marrow. Something dreadful was about to happen. Weak and trembling, I told Chris what the grandmother had done. And that wasn't all. It was Mama who came in and cut out my heart, and she was sparkled all over with diamonds. Kathy, dreams don't mean anything. Yes, they do. Other dreams and other nightmares I'd willingly told my brother, and he'd listened and smiled and expressed his belief that it must be wonderful to have nights like being in a movie theater. But it wasn't that way at all. In a movie, you sit and watch a big screen, and you know you are only watching a story that someone wrote. I participated in my dreams. I was in the dreams, feeling, hurting, suffering, and I'm sorry to say very seldom did I really enjoy them. Since he was so accustomed to me and my strange ways, why did Chris sit as still as a marble statue, as if this dream affected him more than any other? Had he been dreaming too? Kathy, on my word of honor, we are going to escape this house. All four of us will run away. You've convinced me. Your dreams must mean something, or else you wouldn't keep having them. Women are more intuitive than men. It's been proven. The subconscious is at work at night. We won't wait any longer for Mama to inherit the fortune from a grandfather who lives on and never dies. Together, you and I, we'll find a way. From this second on, I vow on my life we depend only on ourselves and your dreams. From the intense way he said this, I knew he wasn't joking, making fun. He meant what he said. I could have shouted. I felt so relieved. We were going to get away. This house wasn't going to do us in after all. In the gloom and chill of that big, shadowed and cluttered room, he stared down into my eyes. Maybe he was seeing me as I saw him, looking larger than life and softer than dreams. Slowly his head inclined toward mine, and he kissed me full on the lips as a way to seal his promise in a strong and meaningful way. Such a peculiar, long kiss to give me the sensation that I was falling down, 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 when I was already lying down. What we needed most was a key to our bedroom door. We knew it was the master key to every room in this house. We couldn't use the sheet ladder because of the twins, and we didn't anticipate, either Chris or I, that our grandmother would be so thoughtlessly careless as to lay aside the key negligently. That just wasn't her way. Her way was to open the door and immediately stash the key in her pocket. Always her hateful grey dresses had pockets. Our mother's way was to be careless, forgetful, indifferent, and she didn't like pockets in her clothes to add extra bulk to her svelte figure. We counted on her. And what did she have to fear from us? The passive, the meek, the quiet, her private little captive darlings who were never going to grow up and be a threat. She was happy in love. It lit up her eyes and made her laugh often. She was so damned unobservant you wanted to scream and make her see the twins so quiet and sick-looking. She never mentioned the mouse. Why wasn't she seeing the mouse? He was on Corey's shoulder, nibbling on Corey's ear, and she never said a word, not even when tears streamed down Corey's face, because she wouldn't congratulate him on winning the affections of a very stubborn mouse that would have gone his way if allowed. She came a generous 2 or 3 times a month, and each time she bore with her the gifts that gave her solace if they gave us none. She came in gracefully to sit a while, wearing her beautiful, expensive clothes, trimmed with furs and decorated with jewels. On her throne she sat as a queen and doled out the painting sets to Chris, the ballet slippers to me, and to each of us she brought sensational-looking clothes, well suited for attic wearing, for up here it didn't matter if they seldom fit, being too large or too small, and our sneakers were sometimes comfortable, sometimes not. And I was still waiting for the bras she kept promising but always forgot. "I'll bring you a dozen or so," she said, with a benevolent, cheerful smile. "All sizes, all colors, and you can try them on and see which you like best and fit best, and I can give the ones you don't want to the maids." And on she chatted vivaciously, always true to her false facade, pretending we still mattered in her life. I fixed my eyes on her, and I waited for her to ask me how the twins were. Had she forgotten that Corey had hay fever, which kept his nose running all the time, and sometimes his nostrils stuffed up so he couldn't breathe except through his mouth? She knew he was supposed to be receiving allergy shots once a month, and years had passed since the last one. Didn't it hurt her to see Corey and Carrie clinging to me as if I were the one who had given them birth? Did one single thing reach out and tell her something was wrong? If it did, in no way did she indicate that she saw us as less than perfectly normal, though I took pains to name our small illnesses. The way we threw up so often now, and how our heads ached from time to time, and we had stomach cramps and sometimes very little energy. "Keep your food in the attic where it's cold," she said, without flinching. She had the nerve to speak to us of parties, of concerts, of the theater, of movies, and going to balls and on trips with her Bart. "Bart and I are going on a shopping spree in New York," she said. "Tell me what you want me to bring you. Make out a list." "Mama, after you Christmas shop in New York, where will you go then?" I asked, careful not to turn my eyes on that key she had so casually tossed on the dresser top. She laughed, liking my question, and clasped her slender white hands together and began to list her plans for the long, dull days after the holidays. "A trip south, perhaps a cruise or a month or so in Florida, and your grandmother will be here to take good care of you." While she chatted on and on, Chris stole stealthily near to slip the key into his pants pocket. On into the bathroom he sauntered, excusing himself. He needn't have bothered. She didn't notice he was gone. She was doing her duty, visiting her children, and thank God she had chosen the right chair to sit in. In the bathroom, I knew Chris was pressing the key into a bar of soap we kept ready for just this way to make a clear impression. Just one of the many things watching endless hours of television had taught us. Once our mother had gone, Chris pulled out the piece of wood he had and began immediately to carve a rough wooden key. Though we had metal from the old trunk locks, we had nothing strong enough to cut and shape it. For hours and hours, Chris slaved meticulously, carving that key, fitting and refitting it into the hardened soap impression. Purposefully, he had chosen very hard wood, fearing soft wood might break in the lock and give away our escape plan. It took 3 days of work before he had a key that worked. Jubilance was ours. We threw our arms about each other and danced around the room, laughing, kissing, almost crying. The twins watched us, amazed we were so happy with a little key. We had a key. We could open our prison door. Yet, strangely, we hadn't planned our future beyond the opening of the door. Money. We must have money, reasoned Chris, stopping in the middle of our wild dance of triumph. With lots of money, all doors are open and all roads are ours to travel. Where can we get money? I asked, frowning and unhappy now. He had found another reason for stalling. There is no way but to steal it from Mama, her husband, and the grandmother. He said this so pronounced, exactly as if thieving were an old and honored profession. And in dire need, perhaps it was and still is. If we're caught, it will mean the whip for all of us, even the twins, I said, casting my eyes on their fearful expressions. And when Mama goes on a trip with her husband, she could starve us again, and God alone knows what else she would do to us. Chris fell down on the small chair before the dressing table. He propped his chin in his hand, thoughtful and considering for minutes. One thing for sure, I don't want to see you or the twins punished. So I will be the one to steal out of here, and I alone will stand guilty if caught. But I'm not going to be caught. It is too risky to take from that old woman. She's too observant. No doubt she knows to a penny exactly the amount of money in her purse. Mama never counts money. Remember how Daddy used to complain about that? He grinned at me reassuringly. I will be just like Robin Hood, stealing from the rich to give to the needy poor. Us. And only on the nights Mama and her husband tell us they're going out. You mean when she tells us, I corrected. And we can always watch from the window on those days she doesn't come. When we dared, we had a fine view of the curved drive to watch the comings and goings. Soon enough, Mama told us she was going to a party. Bart doesn't care much for the social life. He'd rather stay home. But I hate this house. He asks then why we don't move into our own home, and what can I say? What could she say? Darling, I have a secret to tell you. Upstairs, hidden away in the far northern wing, I have 4 children. It was easy enough for Chris to find money in his mother's grand, splendid bedroom. She was careless about money. Even he was shocked at how casually she left 10s and 20s scattered over the dresser. It made him frown and put suspicions in his head. Wasn't she supposed to be saving up for that day when she could take us all out of our prison, even if she did have a husband now? More bills were in her many pocketbooks. Chris found change in her husband's trouser pockets. No, he was not as careless with his money. However, when Chris searched under the chair cushions, a dozen or more coins were there. He felt like a thief, an unwanted intruder in his mother's room. He saw her beautiful clothes, her satin mules, her negligées trimmed with fur or marabou feathers, making his trust shrink even smaller. Time after time that winter he visited that bedroom, growing ever more careless since it was all so easy to steal. He came back to me looking jubilant, looking sad. Day by day our hidden cache was increasing. Why did he look sad? Come with me next time, he said in way of reply. See for yourself. I could go with a clear conscience now, knowing the twins wouldn't awaken and find us gone. They slept so soundly, so deeply, that even in the mornings they woke up blurry-eyed, slow, reluctantly coming into reality. It scared me sometimes to look at them asleep. 2 small dolls, never growing, so sunken into oblivion it seemed more a small death than normal nighttime rest. Go away! Run away! Spring was approaching. We had to leave soon before it was too late. A voice inside, intuitive, kept drumming out this tune. Chris laughed when I told him. Kathy, you and your notions. We need money, at least 500. What is the terrible hurry? We have food now and we aren't being whipped. Even when she catches us half undressed, she doesn't say a word. Why didn't the grandmother punish us now? We had not told Mama of her other punishments, her sins against us, for to me they were sins and not justified in any way. Yet that old woman stayed her hand. Daily she brought up the picnic basket, filled to the brim with sandwiches, with lukewarm soups in thermos bottles, with milk, and always 4 powdered sugar doughnuts. Why couldn't she vary our menus and bring brownies, cookies, slices of pie or cake? Come on, urged Chris, dragging me along the corridors so dark and sinister. Lingering in one place is dangerous. We'll take a quick look in the trophy room, then rush on into Mama's bedroom suite. All I needed was one glance in that trophy room. I hated, actually detested, that oil portrait over the stone fireplace, so much like our father and yet so very different. A man as cruel and heartless as Malcolm Foxworth had no right to be handsome even when he was young. Those cold blue eyes should have corrupted the rest of him with sores, boils. I saw all those heads of dead animals and the tiger and bear skins on the floor, and I thought, how like him to want a room like this. If Chris would let me, I would look into every room, but he insisted we pass by the closed doors, allowing me to peek in only a few. "Nosy," he whispered. "There's nothing of interest in any of them." He was right. Right in so many things. I learned that night what Chris meant when he said this house was only grand and beautiful, not pretty or cozy. Nevertheless, I couldn't help being impressed. Our home in Gladstone shrank in the comparison. When we had quietly traversed many a long and stingily lit dim hall, we came at last upon our mother's grand suite of rooms. Sure, Chris had told me in detail of the swan bed and the infant bed at the foot, but hearing wasn't seeing. My breath pulled in. My dreams took off on wings of fancy. Oh, glory be to heaven! This wasn't a room, but a chamber fit for a queen or a princess. I couldn't believe the posh splendor, the opulence. Overwhelmed, I flitted from here to there, awed to touch the walls covered with silk damask, colored a delicious strawberry pink, richer than the pale mauve of the 2-inch thick carpet. I fingered the soft furry coverlet, and I threw myself upon it and rolled about. I touched the filmy bed curtains and heavier drapes of purple velvet. I jumped up from the bed to stand at the foot and gazed in admiration at that marvelous swan that kept his observant but sleepy red eye riveted on me. Then I backed off, not liking a bed where Mama slept with a man not our father. I walked into her huge walk-in closet, drifting about in a dream of riches that could never be mine except in dreams. She had more clothes than a department store, plus shoes, hats, handbags, 4 full-length fur coats, 3 fur stoles, a white mink cape, and a dark sable one, plus fur hats of a dozen different styles and made of different animal pelts, plus a leopard coat with green wool in between the fur trim. Then there were negligées, nightgowns, peignoir sets, flounced, beruffled, beribboned, feathered, furred, made of velvet, satin, chiffon, combinations. Good glory be, she'd have to live 1,000 years to wear all she owned just once. What caught my eye most, I took from the closet and carried into the golden dressing room Chris showed me. I glanced in her bath with the mirrors all around, live green plants, real flowers growing, 2 commodes, one didn't have a lid. I know now one was a bidet. A separate shower stall, too. "All this is new," explained Chris. "When I first came, the night of the Christmas party, it wasn't so opulent as it is now." I spun about to glare at him, guessing it had been all along, but he hadn't told me. He had been deliberately shielding her, not wanting me to know about all those clothes, the furs, plus the fabulous amount of jewelry she kept hidden in a secret compartment of her long dressing table. No, he hadn't lied, just omitted. It showed in his betraying, shifting eyes, his flushed face, and the quick way he hurried to escape more of my embarrassing questions. No wonder she didn't want to sleep in our room. I was in the dressing room trying on the clothes from Mama's big closet. For the first time in my life, I slipped on nylon hose, and oh, did my legs look heavenly, divine! No wonder women like these things. Next, I put on a bra for the first time, one that was much too large to my dismay. I stuffed the cups full of tissues until they bulged way out. Next came the silver slippers, again too large. And then I topped off the splendor of me with a black dress cut very low in front to show off what I didn't have much of. Now came the fun part, what I used to do when I was little, whenever I had the chance. I sat down at Mama's dressing table and began to apply her makeup with a lavish hand. She had 10 carloads. On my face I slathered the whole works, foundation, rouge, powder, mascara, eyeshadow, lipstick. and then I swept my hair up in a way I considered sexy and stylish, stuck in hairpins, and began to put on jewelry. And last of all, perfume. Lots of it. Tottering awkwardly on the high heels, I teetered over to Chris. "How do I look?" I asked, flirtatiously smiling and fluttering my sooty lashes. Truly, I was prepared for compliments. Hadn't the mirrors already told me I looked sensational? He was carefully going through a drawer, putting everything back exactly as he had found it, but he turned to take a glance. Astonishment widened his eyes, and then he heavily scowled, while I rocked back and forth and sideways, seeking my balance on 4-inch heels, and kept on batting my eyelids. Maybe I didn't know how to put on false eyelashes right. I felt I was looking through spider legs. "How do you look?" he began in a sarcastic way. "Let me tell you precisely. You look like a streetwalker, that's how." He turned away in disgust, as if unable to bear the sight of me. "An adolescent whore, that's what. Now go wash your face and put back all that stuff where you found it and clean up the dressing table." I tottered over to the nearest full-length mirror. It had right and left wings, so she could adjust them and see herself from every angle. And in those 3 very revealing mirrors I took a fresh perspective. And what a fascinating mirror! It closed like a 3-page book, and then there was a beautiful French pastoral scene to view. Twisting and turning, I checked over my appearance. This wasn't the way my mother looked in the same dress. What had I done wrong? True, she didn't ladder so many bracelets up her arms. And she didn't wear 3 necklaces at once, while long, dangling diamond earrings brushed her shoulders, plus a tiara. Nor did she ever wear 2 or 3 rings on each finger, including her thumbs. Oh, but I did dazzle the eyes all right, and my jutting bosom was absolutely magnificent. Truthfully, I have to admit I'd overdone it. I took off 17 bracelets, 26 rings, the necklaces, the tiara, and the black chiffon formal gown that didn't look as elegant on me as when Mama wore it to a dinner party with only pearls at the throat. Oh, but the furs! Nobody could help but feel beautiful in furs. "Hurry up, Kathy. Leave that stuff alone and come help me search." "Chris, I'd love to take a bath in her black marble tub." "God almighty, we don't have time for you to do that." I took off her clothes, her black lace bra, the nylon hose, and the silver slippers, and put on my own things. But on second thoughts, I sneaked a plain white bra from her drawer of many and tucked it down inside my blouse. Chris didn't need my help. He'd been here so often he could find money without my assistance. I wanted to see what was in every drawer, but I'd have to move fast. I pulled open a small drawer of her nightstand, expecting to find cold cream, tissues, but nothing of value for servants to steal. And there was night cream in the drawer, and tissues, plus 2 paperback books to read when sleep was evasive. Were there nights when she tossed and turned and thought uneasily about us? Underneath those paperbacks was a very large and thick book with a colorful dust jacket, How to Create Your Own Needlework Designs. Now that was a title to really intrigue me. Mama had taught me to do some needlepoint stitches and also crewel work on my first birthday in that locked room, and how to create your own designs would indeed be inspiring. Casually, I lifted out the book and flipped through the pages at random. Behind me, Chris was making soft noises as he opened and closed drawers and moved on sneakered feet from here to there. I had expected to see flower designs, anything but what I actually saw. Silent, wide-eyed, full of stunned fascination, I stared down at the photographs in full color. Unbelievable pictures of naked men and women doing... Did people really do such things as that? Was this love-making? Chris wasn't the only one who'd heard whispered tales accompanied by much snickering from older children clustered in groups in the bathroom at school. Why, I had believed it was a sacred, reverent thing to do in complete privacy behind locked doors. This book depicted many couples all in one room, all naked and all into each other in one way or another. Against my will, or so I wanted to think, my hand stole out to slowly turn each page, growing ever more incredulous. So many ways to do it. So many positions. My God, was this what lovesick Raymond and Lily had in mind from page 1 of that Victorian novel? I lifted my head and stared blankly into space. From the beginning of life, were we all headed toward this? Chris spoke my name, informing me he had found enough money. Couldn't steal too much all at once, or it might be noticed. He was taking only a few 5s and many 1s and all the change under chair cushions. "Kathy, what's the matter? Are you deaf? Come on." I couldn't move, couldn't leave, couldn't close that book without pursuing it from cover to cover. Because I stood so enthralled, unable to respond, he came up behind me to look over my shoulder at what held me so mesmerized. I heard his breath pull in sharply. After an eternal time, he exhaled a low whistle. He didn't say a single word until I reached the end and closed the book. Then he took over and began at the beginning, looking at each page he had missed as I stood beside him and looked again, too. There was small printed text opposite the full-page pictures, but the photographs didn't need explanations, not to my mind. Chris closed the book. I glanced at his face quickly. He appeared stunned. I returned the book to the drawer, placing the paperbacks on top just as I had found it. He took my hand and pulled me toward the door. Down all the long and dark halls we went silently back to the northern wing. Now I knew only too well why the witch grandmother had wanted Chris and me put in separate beds, when that compelling call to human flesh was so strong, so demanding and so thrilling it could make people act more like demons than saints. I leaned above Carrie, staring down in her sleeping face, which in her sleep regained the innocence and childishness that evaded her during her waking hours. She seemed a small cherub, lying there on her side, curled up tight, her face rosy and flushed, her hair damp and curling on the nape of her neck and on her rounded forehead. I kissed her, and her cheek felt hot, and then I went over to Corrie to touch his soft curls and kiss his flushed cheek. Children like the twins were made from a little of what I had just viewed in that erotic picture book. So it couldn't all be totally wicked, or else God wouldn't have made men and women the way he did. And yet I was so troubled and so uncertain, and deep down really stunned and shocked, and still... I closed my eyes and silently prayed. God, keep the twins safe and healthy until we're out of here. Let them live until we reach a bright and sunny place where doors are never locked. Please. You can use the bath first, said Chris, sitting on his side of the bed with his back toward me. His head was bowed down, and this was his night to take his bath first. Under a kind of spell, I drifted into the bath and did what I had to, then came out wearing my thickest, warmest, and most concealing granny gown. My face was scrubbed clean of all makeup, my hair was shampooed, and still a little damp as I sat down on the side of my bed to brush it into shining waves. Chris rose silently and entered the bath without looking my way, and when he came out much later, and I was still sitting and brushing my hair, he didn't meet my eyes, nor did I want him to look at me. It was one of the grandmother's rules that we were to kneel down by our beds each night and say prayers. Yet that night neither of us knelt to say prayers. Often I was on my knees by the bed with my palms together under my chin, and I didn't know what to pray, since already I'd prayed so much and none of it helped. I'd just kneel there, empty-minded, bleak-hearted, but my body and its nerve endings felt everything and screamed out what I couldn't bring myself to think, much less say. I stretched out beside Carrie on my back, feeling soiled and changed by that big book that I wished to see again, and would, if I could, read every word of the text. Maybe it would have been the ladylike thing to just put the book back when I'd found out its subject, and most certainly I should have slammed it shut when Chris came to look over my shoulder. Already I knew I wasn't a saint, or an angel, or a Puritan prude, and I felt in my bones that someday in the near future I was going to need to know all there was to know about how bodies were used in ways of love. Slowly, I turned my head to peer through the rosy dimness and see what Chris was doing. He was on his side under the covers, gazing over at me. His eyes glimmered in some faint meandering light that filtered through the heavy draperies, for what light was in his eyes wasn't rosy-colored. "Are you all right?" he asked. "Yes, I'm surviving." And then I said good night in a voice that didn't even sound like me. "Good night, Kathy," he said, using someone else's voice, too.
Chapter 19. My Stepfather. That spring, Chris got sick. He looked greenish around his mouth and threw up every few minutes, staggering back from the bathroom to fall weakly on the bed. He wanted to study Gray's Anatomy, but threw it aside, irritated with himself. "Must have been something I ate," he grouched. "Chris, I don't want to leave you alone," I said at the door, preparing to fit the wooden key into the lock. "Look here, Kathy," he yelled. "It's time you learned to stand on your own 2 feet. You don't need me at your side every livelong minute of the day. That was Mama's trouble. She thought she'd always have a man to lean on. Lean on yourself, Kathy, always." Terror jumped into my heart, flooded up in my eyes. He saw, and he spoke more gently. "I'm all right, really. I can take care of myself. We need the money, Kathy, so go on alone. We might not have another chance." I ran back to his bed, falling down on my knees and pressing my face down on his pajamaed chest. Tenderly he caressed my hair. "Really, Kathy, I'll survive. It's not so bad you have to cry about it. But you've got to understand, no matter what happens to either one of us, the one left has to get the twins out." "Don't say things like that," I cried out. Just to think of him dying made me sick inside. And as I knelt there, staring at him, it fleetingly crossed my mind how often one or the other of us was sick. "Kathy, I want you to leave now. Stand up. Force yourself. And when you get there, take only 1s and 5s, nothing larger. But take all the coins our stepfather lets fall from his pockets. And in the back of his closet he keeps a big tin box full of change. Take a handful of the quarters." He looked pale and weak, thinner, too. Quickly I kissed his cheek, loath to leave when he felt so unwell. Glancing at the sleeping twins, I backed off toward the door, clutching the wooden key in my hand. "I love you, Christopher Dahl," I said in a joking way before opening the door. "I love you too, Catherine Dahl," he said. "Good hunting." I threw him a kiss, then closed and locked the door behind me. It was safe enough to go stealing in Mama's room. Only this afternoon she had told us she and her husband were attending another party at a friend's who lived down the road. And I thought to myself as I stole quietly along the corridors, clinging to the walls, keeping to the shadows, I was going to take at least 120 and 110. I was going to risk somebody noticing. Maybe I'd even steal a few pieces of Mama's jewelry. Jewelry could be pawned, just as good as money, maybe better. All business, all determination, I didn't waste time looking in the trophy room. Straight on to Mama's bedroom I crept, not expecting to see the grandmother, who retired very early at 9, and the hour was 10. With all brave, determined confidence, I stole through the double doors to her rooms and silently closed them behind me. One dim light was burning. Often she left lights burning in her rooms, sometimes every last one, according to Chris. For what was money to our mother now? Hesitating uncertainly, I stood just inside the doors and looked around. Then I froze in terror. There, in a chair, with his long legs stretched before him and crossed at the ankles, sprawled Mama's new husband. I was directly in front of him, wearing a transparent blue nightie that was very short, though little matching panties were underneath. My heart beat out a mad tune of panic as I waited for him to bellow out and demand to know who I was and what the hell was I doing coming uninvited into his bedroom. But he didn't speak. He wore a black tuxedo, and his formal shirt was pink with black-edged ruffles down the front. He didn't bellow. He didn't question because he was dozing. I almost turned about and left. I was so terrified he'd awaken and see me. However, curiosity overcame my trepidations. On my toes, I stole closer to peer down at him. I dared to go so close, up to his very chair, that I could reach out and touch him if I chose. Close enough to put my hand in his pocket and rob him if I chose, which I didn't. Robbery was the last thing I had in mind as I gazed down into his handsome, sleeping face. I was amazed to see what was revealed, now that I was so very close to my mother's dearly beloved Bart. I had viewed him from a distance a number of times, first the night of the Christmas party, and another time when he was down there near the stairs holding a coat for Mama to slip her arms in. He'd kissed the back of her neck and behind her ear, and whispered something that made her smile, and so tenderly he'd drawn her against his chest before they both went out the door. Yes, I'd seen him and heard much about him and knew where his sisters lived and where he was born and where he'd gone to school, but nothing had prepared me for what was so clearly revealed now. "Mama, how could you? You should be ashamed. This man is younger than you, years younger." She hadn't told us that. A secret. How well she could keep such an important secret. And no wonder she adored him, worshipped him. He was the kind of man any woman would want. Just to look at him so casually, elegantly sprawled, I guessed he was both tender and passionate when he made love to her. I wanted to hate that man dozing in the chair, but somehow I just couldn't. Even asleep he appealed to me and made my heart beat faster. Bartholomew Winslow, smiling in his sleep, innocently, unknowingly responded to my admiration. A lawyer, one of those men who knew everything, like doctors, like Chris. Certainly he must be seeing and experiencing something exceptionally pleasing. What was going on behind his eyeballs? I wondered, too, if his eyes were blue or brown. His head was long and lean, his body slim and hard and muscular. A deep cleft was near his lips, looking like a stretched vertical dimple to play games of hide-and-seek as it came and went with his vague, sleepy smiles. He wore a wide, sculptured gold wedding band, and of course I recognized it as the twin to the slimmer one my mother wore. On the index finger of his right hand he wore a large, square-cut diamond ring that sparkled even without much light. On a small finger he wore a fraternity ring. His long fingers had square nails, buffed so they shone as much as mine. I remembered when Mama used to buff Daddy's nails while they played teasing games with their eyes. He was tall. I already knew that. And of everything he had that pleased me well, it was his full and sensual lips beneath the moustache that intrigued me most. Such a beautifully shaped mouth, sensual lips that must kiss my mother everywhere. That book of sexual pleasures had educated me well along that line of how adults gave and took when they were bare. It came over me all of a sudden, the impulse to kiss him, just to see if the dark moustache tickled. Just to know also what a kiss was like from a stranger who was no blood relation at all. Not forbidden, this one. Not sinful to tentatively reach out and very lightly stroke his closely shaven cheek, so softly challenging him to wake up. But he slept on. I leaned above him and pressed my lips down on his ever so lightly, then drew away fast, my heart pounding in a paralyzing kind of fear. I was almost wishing that he would waken, but I was still fearful and afraid. I was too young and unsure of what I had to believe he would come rushing to my defense when he had a woman like my mother madly in love with him. Would he, if I took his arm and shook him awake, sit and listen calmly to my story about 4 children sequestered in a lonely, isolated room year after year, waiting impatiently for their grandfather to die? Would he understand and sympathize with us? And would he force Mama to set us free and give up hopes of inheriting that immense fortune? My hands fluttered nervously to my throat, the way Mama's did when she was caught in a dilemma, not knowing which way to turn. My instinct was shouting loud, "Wake him up!" My suspicions whispered slyly, "Keep quiet, don't let him know. He won't want you, not 4 children he didn't father. He'll hate you for preventing his wife from inheriting all the riches and pleasures that money can buy. Look at him, so young and handsome." And though our mother was exceptionally beautiful, and on the way to being one of the wealthiest women in the world, he could have had someone younger, a fresh virgin who'd never loved anyone else nor slept with another man. And then my indecision was over. The answer was so simple. What were 4 unwanted children when compared to unbelievable riches? They were nothing. Already Mama had taught me that, and a virgin would bore him. Oh, it was unfair, foul. Our mother had everything. Freedom to come and go as she wished, freedom to spend lavishly and buy out the world's best stores if she chose. She even had the money to buy a much younger man to love and sleep with. And what did Chris and I have but broken dreams, shattered promises, and unending frustrations? And what did the twins have but a dollhouse and a mouse and ever-declining health? Back to that forlorn, locked room I went, with tears in my eyes and a helpless, hopeless feeling heavy as stone in my chest. I found Chris sleeping, with Gray's Anatomy lying face down and open on his chest. Carefully I marked his place, closed the book, and put it aside. Then I lay beside him and clung to him, and silent tears came to streak my cheeks and wet his pajama jacket. "Kathy," he said, waking up and coming sleepily into focus. "What's the matter? Why are you crying? Did someone see you?" I couldn't meet his concerned look squarely, and for some inexplicable reason I couldn't tell him what happened. I couldn't speak the words to say I'd found Mother's new husband dozing in her room. Much less could I tell him I'd been so childishly romantic as to kiss him while he slept. "And you didn't even find a single penny?" he asked with so much disbelief. "Not even a penny," I whispered in return, and I tried to hide my face from his. But he cupped my chin and forced me to turn my head so he could delve deep into my eyes. Oh, why did we have to know each other so well? He stared at me while I tried to keep my eyes blank, but it was no use. All I could do was close my eyes and snuggle closer in his arms. He bowed his face into my hair while his hands soothingly stroked my back. "It's all right. Don't cry. You don't know where to look like I do." I had to get away, run away, and when I ran away I would take all of this with me no matter where I went or who I ended up with. "You can get in your own bed now," said Chris in his hoarse voice. "The grandmother could open the door and catch us, you know." "Chris, you didn't throw up again after I left, did you?" "No, I'm better. Just go away, Kathy. Go away." "You really feel better now? You're not just saying that?" "Didn't I just say I was better?" "Good night, Christopher doll," I said, then put a kiss on his cheek before I left his bed and climbed into my own bed to snuggle up with Carrie. "Good night, Catherine. You make a pretty good sister and mother to the twins, but you're one hell of a liar and one damned no-good thief." Each of Chris's forays into Mama's room enriched our hidden cache. It was taking so long to reach our goal of $500, and now summer was upon us again. Now I was 15, the twins recently turned 8. Soon August would mark the 3rd year of our imprisonment. Before another winter set in, we had to escape. I looked at Corey, who was listlessly picking at black-eyed peas because they were good-luck peas. First time, on New Year's Day, he wouldn't eat them. Didn't want any little brown eyes looking at his insides. Now he'd eat them because each pea gave one full day of happiness. So we told him. Chris and I had to make up tales like this, or else he'd eat nothing but the doughnuts. As soon as that meal was over, he crouched down on the floor, picked up his banjo, and fixed his eyes on a silly cartoon. Carrie glued in beside him as close as possible, watching her twin's face and not the TV. "Kathy," she said to me in her bird twitter, "Corey, he don't feel so good." "How do you know?" "Just know." "Has he told you he feels sick?" "He don't have to." "And how do you feel?" "Like always." "And how is that?" "Don't know." Oh, yes, we had to get out, and fast. Later on, I tucked the twins in one bed. When they were both asleep, I'd lift out Carrie and put her in our bed, but for now it was comforting for Corey to go to sleep with his sister by his side. "Don't like this pink sheet," complained Carrie, scowling at me. "We all like white sheets. Where are our white sheets?" Oh, rue the day when Chris and I had made white the safest color of all.
White chalk daisies drawn on the attic floor kept away evil demons and monsters and all the other things the twins feared would get them if White wasn't somewhere near to hide inside, or under, or behind. Lavender, blue, or pink, or flower-strewn sheets and pillowcases were not to be tolerated. Little coloured places gave small imps a hole through which to drive a forked tail, or glare a mean eye, or stab with a wicked tiny spear. Rituals, fetishes, habits, rules, Lord, we had them by the millions, just to keep us safe. "Kathy, why does Mama like black dresses so much?" asked Carrie, waiting as I took off the pink sheets and replaced them with plain white ones. "Mama is blonde and very fair, and black makes her look even more fair and exceptionally beautiful." "She's not scared of black?" "No." "How old do you get before black doesn't bite you with long teeth?" "Old enough to know such a question as that is absolutely silly." "But all the black shadows in the attic have shiny, sharp teeth," said Corey, scooting backward so the pink sheets wouldn't touch his skin. "Now look," I said, seeing Chris's laughing eyes watching as he anticipated some gem I would certainly deliver. "Black shadows don't have shiny, sharp teeth unless your skin is emerald green, and your eyes are purple, and your hair is red, and you have 3 ears instead of 2. Only then is black a threat." Comforted, the twins scurried under the white sheet and white blankets and were soon fast asleep. Then I had time to bathe and shampoo my hair and put on wispy baby doll pajamas. I ran up into the attic to open a window wide, hopeful of catching a cool breeze to freshen the attic so I'd feel like dancing and not wilting. Why was it the wind could find its way inside only during a wintry blast? Why not now when we needed it most? Chris and I shared all our thoughts, our aspirations, our doubts, and our fears. If I had small problems, he was my doctor. Fortunately, my problems were never of much consequence, only those monthly cramps, and that womanly time never showed up on schedule, which he, my amateur doctor, said was only to be expected. Since I was of a quixotic nature, all my internal machinery would follow suit. So I can write now of Chris, and what happened one September night when I was in the attic and he had gone stealing, just as if I were there. For later, when the shock of something totally unexpected had died down a bit, he told me in great detail of this particular trip to Mama's grand suite of luxurious rooms. He told me it was that book in the nightstand drawer that drew him always. It lured him, beckoned to him, was to shipwreck him later, and me too. As soon as he found his quota of money, enough but not too much, he drifted over to the bed and that table as if magnetized. And I thought to myself, even as he told me, why did he have to keep on looking, when each of those photographs was forever engraved on my brain? And there I was, reading the text a few pages at a time, he said, and thinking about right and wrong, and wondering about nature and all its strange exhilarating calls, and thinking about the circumstances of our lives. I thought about you and me, that these should be blossoming years for us, and I had to feel guilty and ashamed to be growing up and wanting what other boys my age could take from girls who were willing. And as I stood there, leafing through those pages, burning inside with so many frustrations, and wishing in a way you hadn't ever found that damn book that never drew my attention with its dull title, I heard voices approaching in the hall. You know who it was? It was our mother and her husband returning. Quickly I shoved the book back into the drawer and tossed in the 2 paperbacks which no one was ever going to finish reading, for the bookmarks were always in the same place. Next I dashed into Mama's closet, that big one, you know, the one nearest her bed, and way back near the shoe shelves I crouched down on the floor beneath her long formal gowns. I thought if she came in she wouldn't see me, and I doubt she would have. But no sooner did I feel this security than I realized I'd forgotten to close the door. That's when I heard our mother's voice. "Really, Bart," she said, as she came into the room and switched on a lamp, "it's just plain carelessness for you to forget your wallet so often." He answered, "I can't help but forget it when it's never in the same place I put it down." I heard him moving things about, opening and closing drawers and so forth. Then he explained,
I'm certain I left it in this pair of trousers, and damned if I'm going anywhere without my driver's license." "The way you drive, I can't say I blame you," said our mother, "but this is going to make us late again. No matter how fast you drive, we'll still miss the first act." "Hey!" exclaimed her husband, and I heard surprise in his voice, and inwardly I groaned, remembering what I'd done. "Here's my wallet on the dresser. Darned if I recall leaving it there. I could swear I put it in these trousers." He really had hidden it in his chest of drawers, Chris explained, under his shirts, and when I found it I took out a few small bills. I just laid it down and went on to look at that book. And Mama, she said, "Really, Bart," as if she was out of patience with him. And then he said, "Corinne, let's move out of this place. I believe those maids are stealing from us. You keep missing money, and so do I. For instance, I know I had 4 5s, and now I only have 3. I groaned again. I thought he had so much he never counted, and the fact that Mama knew what cash she carried in her purse really came as a shock. "Just what difference does a 5 make?" questioned our mother, and that sounded like her to be indifferent about money, just as she had been with Daddy. And then she went on to say the servants were underpaid, and she didn't blame them for taking what they could, when it was left so opportunely before them, actually inviting them to steal. And he answered, "My dear wife, money may come easily to you, but I've always had to work hard to earn a buck, and don't want 10 cents stolen from me. Besides, I can't say my day starts out right when I have your mother's grim face across the table from me every morning. You know, I've never given that any thought, how he felt about that old witch-iron face. Apparently he feels just as we do, and Mama, she grew kind of irritated and said, 'Let's not go through all that again.' And her voice had a hard edge to it. She didn't even sound like herself, Kathy. It never occurred to me before that she talked one way to us and another way to other people. And then she said, 'You know I can't leave this house, not yet. So if we're going, come on, let's go. We're late already.' And that's when our stepfather said he didn't want to go if they'd already missed the first act, for that spoiled the whole show for him, and besides he thought they could find something more entertaining to do than sit in an audience. And of course I guessed he meant they could go to bed and do a little love-making. And if you don't think that didn't make me feel sick, then you don't know me very well. Darned if I wanted to be there when that was going on. However, our mother can be very strong-willed, and that surprised me. She's changed, Kathy, from the way she was with Daddy. It's like she is the boss now, and no man is going to tell her what to do. And she said to him then, 'Like last time? Now that was really embarrassing, Bart. You came back to get your wallet, swearing to me you'd only be gone a few minutes. And what did you do but fall asleep? And there I was at that party without an escort.' Now our stepfather sounded somewhat irritated, both by her words and her tone, if I judged him correctly, and there's a lot you can read into voices even when you don't see facial expressions. 'Oh, how you must have suffered,' he replied, sounding sarcastic. But that didn't last long, for he must be basically a jovial fellow. 'As for me, I had the sweetest dream, and I'd come back every time if I knew that for certain a lovely young girl with the long golden hair would steal into the room and kiss me while I dozed. Oh, she was pretty, and she looked at me so longingly, yet when I opened my eyes she was gone, and I thought she must have been a dream.' What he said made me gasp, Kathy. It was you, wasn't it? How could you be so bold, so indiscreet? I got so damned mad with you I felt ready to explode if just one more little thing happened to set me off. You think you're the only one wound up right? You think you're the only one with frustrations, with doubts, suspicions, and fears? Well, take comfort from knowing I have them too. You've seen to that. And boy, was I mad at you, madder than I've ever been before. And then Mama said sharply to her husband, 'God, I am sick of hearing about the girl and her kiss. Why, to hear you tell it, you've never been kissed before.' And I thought that then and there they might have an argument. But Mama changed her voice and sounded sweet and loving, like she used to sound with Daddy. But it proved she was more determined to leave this house than a would-be lover who would use the swan bed then and there, for Mama said, 'Come along, Bart, we'll stay overnight in a hotel, and then you won't have to see my mother's face in the morning.'
And that solved my concern about how I was going to escape that room before they used that swan bed. But damned if I would stay and listen or spy. This was all happening while I was up in the attic, sitting on a windowsill, waiting for Chris to reappear. I was thinking of the silver music box Daddy had given me, and wishing I had it back. I didn't know then that the episode in Mama's room was to have its repercussions. Something creaked behind me, a soft step on rotting wood. I jumped, startled, scared, and turned, expecting to see God knows what. Then I sighed, for it was only Chris, standing in the gloom, silently staring at me. Why? Did I look prettier than usual? Was it the moonlight shining through my airy clothes? All random doubts were cleared when he said in a voice gritty and low, "You look beautiful sitting there like that." He cleared the frog in his throat. "The moonlight is etching you with silver blue, and I can see the shape of your body through your clothes." Then, bewilderingly, he seized me by the shoulders, digging in his fingers hard. They hurt. "Damn you, Kathy! You kissed that man! He could have awakened and seen you and demanded to know who you were, and not thought you only a part of his dream." Scary the way he acted. The fright I felt for no reason at all. "How do you know what I did? You weren't there. You were sick that night." He shook me, glaring his eyes, and again I thought he seemed a stranger. "He saw you, Kathy. He wasn't soundly asleep." "He saw me?" I cried, disbelieving. It wasn't possible. Wasn't. "Yes," he yelled. This was Chris, who was usually in such control of his emotions. "He thought you were part of his dream. But don't you know that Mama can guess who it was just by putting two and two together, just as I have? Damn you and your romantic notions. Now they're on to us. They won't leave money casually about as they did before. He's counting, she's counting, and we don't have enough. Not yet." He yanked me down from the windowsill. He appeared wild and furious enough to slap my face, and not once in all our lives had he ever struck me, though I'd given him reason to when I was younger. But he shook me until my eyes rolled, until I was dizzy and crying out, "Stop! Mama knows we can't pass through a locked door." This wasn't Chris. This was someone I'd never seen before, primitive, savage. He yelled out something like, "You're mine, Kathy, mine. You'll always be mine. No matter who comes into your future, you'll always belong to me. I'll make you mine. Tonight. Now." I didn't believe it. Not Chris. And I did not fully understand what he had in mind, nor, if I am to give him credit, do I think he really meant what he said, but passion has a way of taking over. We fell to the floor, both of us. I tried to fight him off. We wrestled, turning over and over, riding, silent, a frantic struggle of his strength against mine. It wasn't much of a battle. I had the strong dancer's legs, he had the biceps, the greater weight and height, and he had much more determination than I to use something hot, swollen, and demanding, so much it stole reasoning and sanity from him. And I loved him. I wanted what he wanted, if he wanted it that much, right or wrong. Somehow we ended up on that old mattress, that filthy, smelly, stained mattress that must have known lovers long before this night, and that is where he took me, and forced in that swollen, rigid, male sex part of him that had to be satisfied. It drove into my tight and resisting flesh, which tore and bled. Now we had done what we both swore we'd never do. Now we were doomed through all eternity, damned to roast forever, hung upside down and naked over the everlasting fires of hell, sinners, just as the grandmother had forecasted so long ago. Now I had all the answers. Now there might be a baby to make us pay in life and not wait for hell and everlasting fires reserved for such as us. We drew apart and stared at each other, our faces numb and pale from shock, and barely could we speak as we drew on our clothes. He didn't have to say he was sorry. It was all over him, the way he quivered, the way his hands trembled and were so clumsy with his buttons. Later we went out on the roof. Long strings of clouds blew across the face of the full moon, so it would duck and hide, then peek out again. And on the roof, on a night that was made for lovers, we cried in each other's arms. He hadn't meant to do it, and I had meant never to let him. The fear of the baby that might be the result of one single kiss on moustached lips rose high in my throat and hesitated on my tongue. It was my worst fear. More than hell or God's wrath I feared giving birth to a monstrous baby, deformed, a freak, an idiot. But how could I speak of this? Already he was suffering enough. However, his thoughts were more knowledgeable than mine. "The odds are all against a baby," he said fervently. "Just one time. There won't be a conception. I swear there won't be another time, no matter what. I'll castrate myself before I'll let it happen again." Then he had pulled me tightly against him, so I was crushed so hard it hurt my ribs. "Don't hate me, Kathy. Please don't hate me. I didn't mean to rape you, I swear to God. There's been many a time when I've been tempted, and I was able to turn it off. I'd leave the room, go into the bathroom or into the attic. I'd bury my nose in a book until I felt normal again." Tight as I could, I wrapped my arms around him. "I don't hate you, Chris," I whispered, pressing my head tightly against his chest. "You didn't rape me. I could have stopped you if I'd really wanted to. All I had to do was bring my knee up hard where you told me to. It was my fault, too. Oh, yes, my fault, too. I should have known better than to kiss Mama's handsome young husband. I shouldn't have worn skimpy little see-through garments around a brother who had all a man's strong physical needs, and a brother who was always so frustrated by everything and everyone. I had played upon his needs, testing my femininity, having my own burning yearnings for fulfillment. It was a peculiar kind of night, as if fate had planned this night long ago, and this night was our destiny, right or wrong. It was darkness lit up by the moon so full and bright, and the stars seemed to flash Morse code beams to one another. Fate accomplished. The wind in the leaves rustled and made an eerie, melancholy music that was tuneless, yet music just the same. How could anything as human and loving be ugly on such a beautiful night as this one? Perhaps we stayed too long on the roof. The slate was cold, hard, rough. It was early September. Already the leaves were beginning to fall, so soon to be touched by the winter's frosty hand. Hot as hell in the attic. On the roof it was beginning to turn very, very cold. Closer, Chris and I huddled, clinging to each other for safety and warmth. Youthful, sinful lovers of the worst kind. We had dropped 10 miles in our own esteem, done in by yearnings stretched too thin by constant closeness. Just once too often we'd tempted fate and our own sensuous natures, and I hadn't even known at the time that I was sensuous, much less that he was. I'd thought it was only beautiful music that made my heart ache and my loins crave. I hadn't known it was something far more tangible. Like one heart shared between us, we drummed out a terrible tune of self-punishment for what we'd done. A colder breeze lifted a dead leaf to the roof and sent it scuttling merrily on its way to catch in my hair. It crackled, dry and brittle, when Chris plucked it out and held it, just staring down at a dead maple leaf as if his very life depended on reading its secret for knowing how to blow in the wind. No arms, no legs, no wings, but it could fly when dead. "Kathy," he began in a crackling, dry voice, "we now have exactly $396.44. Won't be long before the snow starts to fall. And we don't own winter coats or boots that fit, and the twins are already so weakened that they will catch cold easily and might pass from colds into pneumonia. I wake up in the night worrying about them, and I've seen you lying on your bed staring at Carrie, so you must be worrying too. I doubt very much we'll be finding money lying about in Mama's suite of rooms now. They suspect a maid is stealing from them, or they did. Maybe now Mama suspects that it could be you. I don't know. I hope not. Regardless of what either of them thinks, the next time I play thief, I'm forced to steal her jewelry. I'll make a grand sweep, take it all, and then we'll run. We'll take the twins to a doctor as soon as we're far enough away, and we'll have enough money to pay their bills." Take the jewelry. What I'd begged him to do all along. Finally he would do it. Agree to steal the hard-won prizes Mama had struggled so to gain, and in the process she was going to lose us. But would she care? Would she? That old owl, that might be the same one that greeted us at the train depot on the first night we came, hooted in the far distance, sounding ghostly. While we watched, thin, slow grey mists began to rise up from the damp ground, chilled by the night's sudden cold. The thick and billowing fog swelling up to the roof, undulating, curling waves, rolling as a misty sea to shroud over us. And all we could see in the murky grey and cold, damp clouds was that single great eye of God shining up there in the moon. I awakened before dawn. I stared over to where Corrie and Chris slept. Even as my sleepy eyes opened and my head turned, I sensed that Chris was awake too, and had been for some time. He was already looking at me, and shiny, glistening tears sparkled the blue of his eyes and smeared the whites. The tears that rolled to fall on his pillow I named as they fell: shame, guilt, blame. "I love you, Christopher doll. You don't have to cry, for I can forget if you can forget, and there's nothing to forgive." He nodded and said nothing, but I knew him well, right down to his bone marrow. I knew his thoughts, his feelings, and all the ways to wound his ego fatally. I knew that through me he had struck back at the one woman who had betrayed him in trust, faith, and love. All I had to do was look in my hand mirror, with the big CLF on the back, and I could see my own mother's face as she must have looked at my age. And so it had come to pass just as the grandmother predicted. Devil's issue, created by evil seeds sown in the wrong soil, shooting up new plants to repeat the sins of the fathers and the mothers. Chapter 20. Color all days blue, but save one for black. We were leaving, any day. As soon as Mama gave the word that she'd be out for the evening, she'd also be out of all her valuable transportable possessions. We would not go back to Gladstone. There the winter came and lasted until May. We would go to Sarasota, where the circus people lived. They were known for having and showing kindness to those from strange backgrounds. Since Chris and I had grown accustomed to high places, the roof, the many ropes attached to the rafter beams, I'd blithely said to Chris, "We'll be trapeze performers." He grinned, thinking it a ridiculous idea, at first, next calling it inspired. "Golly, Kathy, you'll look great in spangled pink tights," he began to sing. "She flies through the air with the greatest of ease, the daring young beauty on the flying trapeze." Corrie jerked up his blonde head, blue eyes wide with fear. "No," said Carrie, his more proficient voice. "We don't like your plans. We don't want you to fall." "We'll never fall," said Chris, "because Kathy and I are an unbeatable team." I stared over at him, recalling the night in the schoolroom and on the roof afterward when he'd whispered, "I'm never going to love anyone but you, Kathy. I know it. I've got that kind of feeling. Just us. Always." Casually, I'd laughed. "Don't be silly. You know you don't really love me in that way. And you don't have to feel guilty or ashamed. It was my fault, too. And we can pretend it never happened and make sure it never happens again. But, Kathy, if there were others for you and me, never, never would we feel this way for each other. But I want to feel this way about you, and it's too late for me to love or trust anyone else." How old I felt, looking at Chris, at the twins, making plans for all of us, speaking so confidently of how we would make our way. A consolation token for the twins, to give them peace, when I knew we would be forced to do anything and everything to earn a living. September had passed on into October. Soon the snow would fly. "Tonight," said Chris, after Mama took off, saying a hasty goodbye, not pausing in the doorway to look back at us. Now she could hardly bear to look at us. We put one pillowcase inside another to make it strong. In that sack Chris would dump all Mama's precious jewelry. Already I had our 2 bags packed and hidden in the attic, where Mama never went now. As the day wore on toward evening, Corey began to vomit, over and over again. In the medicine cabinet we had non-prescription drugs for abdominal upsets. Nothing we used would stop the terrible retching that left him pale, trembling, crying. Then his arms encircled my neck and he whispered, "Mama, I don't feel so good." "What can I do to make you feel better, Corey?" I asked, feeling so young and inexperienced. "Mickey," he whispered weakly. "I want Mickey to sleep with me." "But you might roll over on him and then he'd be dead. You wouldn't want him to die, would you?" "No," he said, looking stricken at the thought. And then that terrible gagging began again, and in my arms he grew so cold. His hair was pasted to his sweaty brow. His blue eyes stared vacantly into my face as over and over again he called for his mother. "Mama, Mama, my bones hurt." "It's all right," I soothed, picking him up and carrying him back to bed where I could change his soiled pajamas. How could he throw up again when there couldn't be anything left? "Chris is going to help you. Don't worry." I lay beside him and held his weak and quivering body in my arms. Chris was at his desk poring over medical reference books, using Corey's symptoms to name the mysterious illness that struck each one of us from time to time. He was almost 18 now, but far from being a doctor. "Don't go and leave me and Carrie behind," Corey pleaded. He cried out later and louder, "Chris, don't go. Stay here." What did he mean? Didn't he want us to run away? Or did he mean never sneak into Mama's suite of rooms again to steal? Why was it Chris and I believed the twins seldom paid attention to what we did? Surely he and Carrie knew we'd never go away and leave them behind. We'd die before we did that. A little shadowy thing wearing all white drifted over to the bed and stood with big watery blue eyes, staring and staring at her twin brother. She was barely 3 feet high. She was old and she was young. She was a tender little plant brought up in a dark hothouse, stunted and withered. "May I?" she began very properly, as we had tried to teach her, and she had consistently refused to use the grammar we tried to teach, but on this night of nights she did the best she could. "Sleep with Corey? We won't do anything bad or evil or unholy. I just want to be close to him." Let the grandmother come and do her worst. We put Carrie to bed with Corey, and then Chris and I perched on opposite sides of the big bed and watched, full of anxiety, as Corey tossed about restlessly and gasped for breath and cried out in his delirium. He wanted the mouse, he wanted his mother, his father, he wanted Chris, and he wanted me. Tears were pooling down on the collar of my nightgown, and I looked to see Chris with tears on his cheeks. "Carrie, Carrie, where is Carrie?" he asked repeatedly, long after she'd gone to sleep. Their wan faces were only inches apart, and he was looking directly at her, and still he didn't see her. When I took the time to look from him to Carrie, she seemed but a bit better off. Punishment, I thought. God was punishing us, Chris and me, for what we'd done. The grandmother had warned us. Every day she'd warned us, up until the day we were whipped. All through the night Chris read one medical book after another while I got up from the twins' bed and paced the room. Finally Chris raised his red-rimmed, bloodshot eyes. "Food poisoning. The milk. It must have been sour." "It didn't taste sour or smell sour," I answered in a mumble. I was always careful to sniff and taste everything first before I'd give it to the twins or Chris. For some reason I thought my taste buds keener than Chris's, who liked everything and would eat anything, even rancid butter. The hamburger, then, I thought it had a funny taste. It tasted all right to me, and it must have tasted fine to him as well, for he'd eaten half of Carrie's hamburger on a bun and all of Corey's. Corey hadn't wanted anything to eat all day. Kathy, I noticed you hardly ate anything yourself all day. You're almost as thin as the twins. She does bring us enough food, such as it is. You don't have to stint on yourself. Whenever I was nervous or frustrated or worried, and I was all three now, I'd begin the ballet exercises, and holding lightly to the dresser that acted as a bar, I began to warm up by doing pliés. Do you have to do that, Kathy? You're already skin and bones. And why didn't you eat today? Are you sick too? But Corey so loves the doughnuts, and that's all I want to eat too, and he needs them more than I do. The night wore on. Chris returned to reading the medical books. I gave Corey water to drink, and right away he threw it up. I washed his face with cold water a dozen times and changed his pajamas 3 times, and Carrie slept on and on and on. Dawn. The sun came up, and we were still trying to figure out what made Corey ill when the grandmother came in, bearing the picnic basket of food for today. Without a word, she closed the door, locked it, put the key in her dress pocket, and advanced to the gaming table. From the basket she lifted the huge thermos of milk, the smaller thermos of soup, then the packets wrapped in foil containing sandwiches, fried chicken, or bowls of potato salad or coleslaw, and last of all the packet of 4 powdered sugar doughnuts. She turned to leave. "Grandmother," I said tentatively. She had not looked Corey's way, hadn't seen. "I have not spoken to you," she said coldly. "Wait until I do." "I can't wait," said I, growing angry, rising up from my place on the side of Corey's bed and advancing. "Corey's sick. He's been throwing up all night and all day yesterday. He needs a doctor and his mother." She didn't look at me or at Corey. Out of the door she stalked, then clicked the lock behind her. No word of comfort, no word to say she'd tell our mother. "I'll unlock the door and go and find Mama," said Chris, still wearing the clothes he'd put on yesterday and hadn't taken off to go to bed. "Then they'll know we have a key." "Then they'll know." Just then the door opened and Mama came in with the grandmother trailing behind her. Together they hovered over Corey, touching his clammy, cold face, their eyes meeting. In a corner they drifted to whisper and connive, glancing from time to time at Corey, who lay quiet as one approaching death. Only his chest heaved in spasms. From his throat came gasping, choking noises. I went and wiped the beads of moisture from his brow. Funny how he could feel cool and still sweat. Corey rasped in, out, and there was Mama, doing nothing, unable to make a decision, fearful still of letting someone know there was a child when there shouldn't be any. "Why are you standing there whispering?" I shouted out. "What choice do you have but to take Corey to a hospital and get him the best doctor available?" They glared at me, both of them. Grim-faced, pale, trembling, Mama fixed her blue eyes on me, then anxiously they sidled over to Corey. What she saw on the bed made her lips tremble, made her hand shake, and the muscles near her lips twitch. She blinked repeatedly, as if holding back tears. Narrowly I watched each betraying sign of her calculating thoughts. She was weighing the risks of Corey being discovered and causing her to lose that inheritance. For that old man downstairs just had to die one day, didn't he? He couldn't hold on forever. I screamed out, "What's the matter with you, Mama? Are you just going to stand there and think about yourself and that money while your youngest son lies there and dies? You have to help him. Don't you care what happens to him? Have you forgotten you are his mother? If you haven't, then damn it, act like his mother. Stop hesitating. He needs attention now, not tomorrow." Sanguine color flooded her face. She snapped her eyes back to me. "You," she spat. "Always it's you." And with that she raised her heavily ringed hand, and she slapped my face hard. Then again she slapped me. The very first time in my life I'd been slapped by her, and for such a reason. Outraged, without thinking, I slapped back just as hard. The grandmother stood back and watched,
Smug satisfaction twisted her ugly, thin mouth into a crooked line. Chris hurried to seize hold of my arms when I would strike Mama again. "Kathy, you're not helping Corey by acting like this. Calm down. Mama will do the right thing." It was a good thing he held my arms, for I wanted to slap her again and make her see what she was doing. My father's face flashed before my eyes. He was frowning, silently telling me I must always have respect for the woman who gave me birth. I knew that's how he would feel. He wouldn't want me to hit her. "Damn you to hell, Corinne Foxworth," I shouted at the top of my lungs, "if you don't take your son to a hospital. You think you can do anything you want with us and no one will find out? Well, you can throw away that security blanket, for I'll find a way for revenge if it takes me the rest of my life. I'll see that you pay, and dearly pay, if you don't do something right now to save Corey's life. Go on, glare your eyes at me and cry and plead and talk to me about money and what it can buy. But it can't buy back a child once he's dead. And if that happens, don't think I won't find a way to get to your husband and tell him you have 4 children you have kept hidden in a locked room with their only playground and attic, and you've kept them there for years and years. See if he loves you then. Watch his face and wait to see how much respect and admiration he has for you then." She winced, but her eyes shot deadly looks at me. "And what's more, I'll go to the grandfather and tell him, too," I yelled even louder. "And you won't inherit one damned red penny, and I'll be glad, glad, glad." From the look on her face, she could kill me. But oddly enough, it was that despicable old woman who spoke in a quiet way. "The girl is right, Corinne. The child must go to a hospital." They came back that night, the 2 of them, after the servants retired to their quarters over the huge garage. Both of them were bundled up in heavy coats, for it had suddenly turned frigid cold. The evening sky had gone grey, chilled with early winter that threatened snow. The 2 of them pulled Corey from my arms and wrapped him in a green blanket, and it was Mama who lifted him up. Carrie let out a scream of anguish. "Don't take Corey away," she howled. "Don't take him, don't." She threw herself into my arms, wailing at me to stop them from taking away a twin from whom she'd never been separated. I stared down in her small, pale face, streaked with tears. "It's all right for Corey to go," I said as I met my mother's glare, "for I am going too. I'll stay with Corey while he's in the hospital. Then he won't be afraid. When the nurses are too busy to wait on him, I'll be there. That will make him get well quicker, and Carrie will feel good knowing I'm with him." I spoke the truth. I knew Corey would recover quicker if I was there with him. I was his mother now, not her. He didn't love her now. It was me he needed and me he wanted. Children are very wise intuitively. They know who loves them most and who only pretends. "Kathy's right, Mama." Chris spoke up, and he looked at her directly in the eye without warmth. "Corey depends on Kathy. Please let her go, for as she says, her presence there will help him get well sooner, and she can describe to his doctor all his symptoms better than you can." Mama's glassy, blank stare turned his way as if struggling to grasp his meaning. I admit she looked distraught, and her eyes jumped from me to Chris, and then to her mother, and then to Carrie, and back to Corey. "Mama," said Chris more firmly, "let Kathy go with you. I can do for Carrie if that's what you're worried about." Of course they didn't let me go. Our mother carried Corey out into the hall. His head was thrown back, his cowlick bobbing up and down as she strode away with her child wrapped in a green blanket the very color of spring grass. The grandmother gave me a cruel smile of derisive victory, then closed and locked the door. They left Carrie bereft, screaming, tears flowing. Her small, weak fists beat against me as if I were to blame. "Kathy, I want to go too. Make them let me go. Corey don't want to go nowhere I don't go. And he forgot his guitar." Then all her anger dissipated, and she fell into my arms and sobbed. "Why, Kathy? Why?" Why? That was the biggest question in our lives. By far it was the worst and longest day of our lives. We had sinned, and how quickly God set about punishing us. He did keep his sharpest eye turned on us, as if he knew all along sooner or later we would prove ourselves unworthy, just as the grandmother had known. It was like it had been in the beginning, before the TV set came to take over the better part of our days. All through the day we sat quietly without turning on the television, just waiting to hear how Corey was. Chris sat in the rocker and held out his arms to Carrie and me. We both sat on his lap as he rocked slowly back and forth, creaking the floorboards. I don't know why Chris's legs didn't grow numb. We sat on him for so long. Then I got up to take care of Mickey's cage and gave him food to eat and water to drink, and I held him and petted him and told him soon his master would be coming back. I believe that mouse knew something was wrong. He didn't play cheerfully in his cage, and even though I left the door open, he didn't come out to scamper all over the room and head for Carrie's dollhouse that enchanted him the most. I prepared the pre-cooked meals, which we hardly touched. When the last meal of the day was over and the dishes were put away and we were bathed and ready for bed, we all three knelt in a row beside Corey's bed and said our prayers to God. Please, please let Corey get well and come back to us. If we prayed for anything else, I don't recall what it was. We slept, or tried to, all three in the same bed, with Carrie between Chris and me. Nothing gross was ever going to happen between us again. Never, never again. God, please don't punish Corey as a way to strike back at Chris and me and make us hurt, for already we hurt, and we didn't mean to do it, we didn't. It just happened, and only once. And it wasn't any pleasure, God, not really, not any. A new day dawned, grim, grey, forbidding. Behind the drawn draperies, life started up for those who lived on the outside, those unseen by us. We dragged ourselves into focus and poked about, trying to fill our time and trying to eat and make Mickey happy when he seemed so sad without the little boy who laid down trails of breadcrumbs for him to follow. I changed the mattress covers with the assistance of Chris, for that was a very hard thing to do, to slip a full-size mattress in and out of one of those heavy quilted things, and yet we had to do it often because of Corey's lack of control. Chris and I made the beds up with clean linens and smoothed on the spreads and tidied up the room, while Carrie sat alone in the rocker and stared off into space. Around 10, there was nothing left to do but sit on the bed nearest the door to the hall, with our eyes riveted upon the knob, willing it to turn and admit Mama, who would bring us news. Shortly thereafter Mama came in, with her eyes rimmed red from crying. Behind her was the steel-eyed grandmother, tall, stern, no tears. Our mother faltered near the door as if her legs would give way and spill her to the floor. Chris and I jumped to our feet, but Carrie only stared at Mama's empty eyes. I drove Corey to a hospital miles away, the nearest one, really, explained our mother in a tight and hoarse voice that choked from time to time. And I registered him under a false name, saying he was my nephew, my ward. Lies, always lies. Mama, how is he? I asked impatiently. Her glazed blue eyes turned our way, void eyes staring vacantly, lost eyes seeking something gone forever. I guessed it was her humanity. Corey had pneumonia, she intoned. The doctors did all they could, but it was too late. Had pneumonia? All they could? Too late? All past tenses. Corey was dead. We were never going to see him again. Chris said later the news hit him hard in the groin like a kick, and I did see him stumble backward and spin around to hide his face as his shoulders sagged and he sobbed. At first I didn't believe her. I stood and I stared and I doubted. But the look on her face convinced me, and something big and hollow swelled up inside my chest. I sank down on the bed, numb, almost paralyzed, and didn't even know I was crying until my clothes were wet. And even as I sat and cried, I still didn't want to believe Corey was gone from our lives. And Carrie, Poor Carrie! She lifted up her head, threw it back, and opened up her mouth and screamed. She screamed and screamed until her voice went and she could scream no more. She drifted to the corner where Corey kept his guitar and his banjo, and neatly she lined up all his pairs of small, worn tennis shoes. And that's where she chose to sit, with the shoes, with the musical instruments and Mickey's cage nearby, and from that moment on not a word escaped her lips. "Will we go to his funeral?" Chris asked in a choked way, with his back still turned. "He's already been buried," said Mamma. "I had a false name put on the tombstone." And then very quickly she escaped the room and our questions, and the grandmother followed, her lips set in a grim, thin line. Right before our horrified eyes, Carrie shriveled more each day. I felt God might as well have taken Carrie, too, and buried her alongside Corey in that far-away grave with the wrong name that didn't even have the comfort of a father buried nearby. None of us could eat much. We became listless and tired, always tired. Nothing held our interest. Tears! Chris and I cried 5 oceans of tears. We assumed all the blame. A long time ago we should have escaped. We should have used that wooden key and gone for help. We had let Corey die. He'd been our responsibility, our dear, quiet little boy of many talents, and we had let him die. Now we had a small sister huddled in a corner, growing weaker each passing day. Chris said in a low voice, so Carrie wouldn't overhear, just in case she was listening, though I doubted she was. She was blind, deaf, mute, our babbling brook damned. "We've got to run, Kathy, and quick, or we are all going to die like Corey. Something is wrong with all of us. We've been locked up too long. We've lived abnormal lives, like being in a vacuum, without germs, without the infections children usually come in contact with. We are without resistance to infections." "I don't understand," I said. "What I mean is," he whispered as we huddled in the same chair, "like the creatures from Mars in that book, The War of the Worlds, we could all die from a single cold germ." Horrified, I could only stare at him. He knew so much more than I did. I turned my gaze on Carrie in the corner. Her sweet baby face, with eyes too large and shadowed underneath, stared blankly forward at nothing. I knew she had her vision fixed on eternity where Corey was. All the love I'd given Corey I put into Carrie now, so afraid for her. Such a tiny skeleton body, and her neck was so weak, too small for her head. Was this the way all the Dresden dolls were going to end? "Chris, if we have to die, it's not going to be like mice in a trap. If germs can kill us, then let it be germs. So when you steal tonight, take everything of value you can find and we can carry. I'll pack a lunch to take along. With Corey's clothes taken from the suitcases, we'll have more room. Before the morning comes, we'll be gone." "No," he said quietly. "Only if we know Mama and her husband have gone out. Only then can I take all the money and leave, and all the jewelry in one fell swoop. Take only what we absolutely need. No toys, no games. And, Kathy, Mama may not go out tonight. Certainly she can't attend parties in her time of mourning." How could she mourn when she had to keep her husband always in the dark? And no one came but the grandmother to tell us what was going on. She refused to speak to us or look at us. In my mind, we were already on our way, and I looked at her as if she were already part of the past. Now that our time to depart was so near, I felt frightened. It was big out there. We'd be on our own. What would the world think of us now? We weren't beautiful like we used to be, only pale and sickly attic mice with long flaxen hair, wearing expensive but ill-fitting clothes and sneakers on our feet. Chris and I had educated ourselves from reading so many books, and television had taught us much about violence, about greed, about imagination, but it had taught us hardly anything that was practical and useful in preparing us to face reality. Survival, that's what TV should teach innocent children, how to live in a world that really doesn't give a damn about anyone but their own, and sometimes not even their own. Money. If there was one thing we'd learned during the years of our imprisonment, it was that money came first and everything else came after. How well Mama had said it long ago. It's not love that makes the world go round, it's money. I took Corey's small clothes from the suitcase, his second-best sneakers, 2 pairs of pajamas, and all the time tears fell and my nose ran. In one of the side pockets of the suitcase I found sheet music he must have packed himself. Oh, it did hurt to pick up those sheets and see the lines he had drawn by using a ruler, and his little black notes and half-notes so crookedly done. And beneath the musical score, he had taught himself to write down the music from an encyclopedia Chris had found for him, Corey had written words to a half-completed song. I wish the night would end. I wish the day'd begin. I wish it would rain or snow, or the wind would blow, or the grass would grow. I wish I had yesterday. I wish there were games to play. Oh, God, was there ever such a sad, melancholy song? So these were the lyrics to a tune I'd heard him play over and over, wishing, always wishing for something he couldn't have, something all other little boys accepted as a normal, unremarkable part of their lives. I could have screamed the anguish I felt. I went to sleep with Corey on my mind, and like always, when I was most troubled, I fell into dreams. But this time I was only me. I found myself on a winding dirt path with wide, flat pastures that grew wild flowers of crimson and pink on the left, and on the right yellow and white blossoms swayed gently in the soft, warm, kind breezes of eternal spring. A small child clung to my hand. I looked down, expecting to see Carrie, but it was Corey. He was laughing and happy, and he skipped along beside me, his short legs trying to keep pace with mine, and in his hand he held a bouquet of the wildflowers. He smiled up at me and was about to speak when we heard the twitterings of many brightly colored birds in the parasol trees ahead. A tall, slim man with golden hair, his skin deeply tanned, wearing white tennis clothes, came striding forward from a glorious garden of abundant trees and radiant flowers, including roses of all colors. He paused a dozen yards away and held his arms out to Corey. My heart, even in my dream, pounded in excitement and joy. It was Daddy. Daddy had come to meet Corey so he wouldn't have to travel alone the rest of the way. And though I knew I should release Corey's small, hot hand, I would hold him forever with me. Daddy looked at me, not with pity, not with reprimand, but only with pride and admiration. And I let go of Corey's hand and stood to watch him joyfully run into Daddy's arms. He was swept up by powerful arms that once used to hold me and make me feel all the world was a wonderful thing. And I would step down the path, too, and feel those arms about me once again, and allow Daddy to take me where he would. "Kathy, wake up," said Chris, sitting on my bed and shaking me. "You're talking in your sleep, and laughing, and crying, and saying hello, and then goodbye. Why is it you dream so much?" My dreams spilled from me so fast my words were garbled. Chris just sat there and stared at me, as did Carrie, who had awakened to hear as well. It had been so long since I last saw my father, his face had faded in my memory, but as I looked at Chris I grew very confused. He was so very much like Daddy, only younger. That dream was to haunt me many a day, pleasantly. It gave me peace. It gave me knowledge I hadn't had before. People never really died. They only went on to a better place, to wait a while for their loved ones to join them. And then once more they went back to the world, in the same way they had arrived the first time around. Chapter 21. Escape. November 10th. This was to be our last day in prison. God would not deliver us, we would deliver ourselves. As soon as the hour passed 10 tonight, Chris would commit his final robbery. Our mother had visited to stay but a few minutes, ill at ease with us now, very obviously so. "Bart and I are going out tonight. I don't want to, but he insists. You see, he doesn't understand why I look so sad." I bet he didn't understand. Chris slung over his shoulder the dual pillowcases in which to carry back heavy jewels. He stood in the open doorway and gave Carrie and me one long, long look before he closed the door and used his wooden key to lock us in, for he couldn't leave the door open and in this way alert the grandmother if she came to check. We couldn't hear Chris steal along the long, dark northern corridor, for the walls were too thick and the hall carpet too plush and soundproofing. Side by side, Carrie and I lay, my arms protectively around her. If that dream hadn't come to tell me Corey was well taken care of, I would have cried not to feel him close still. I couldn't help but ache for a little boy who would call me Mama whenever he was sure his older brother wouldn't overhear. Always he'd been so afraid Chris might consider him a sissy if he knew how much he missed and needed his mother, so much so he had to make do with me. And though I told him Chris would never laugh or jeer, for he had been very needing of a mother too once upon a time, still Corey would keep it a secret just between him and me, and Carrie. He had to pretend to be manly and convince himself it didn't matter if he had neither a mother nor a father, when all along it did matter a great deal. I held Carrie tight, tight against me, vowing that if ever I had a child or children, they'd never feel a need for me that I didn't sense and respond to. I'd be the best mother alive. Hours dragged by like years, and still Chris didn't return from his last foray into our mother's grand suite of rooms. Why was it taking so long this time? Wide awake and miserable, I was filled with fears, and envisioned all the calamities that could stay him. Bart Winslow, the suspicious husband, he'd catch Chris, call the police, have Chris thrown in jail. Mama would stand calmly by and mildly express shock and faint surprise that someone would dare steal from her. Oh, no, of course she didn't have a son. Everybody knew she was childless, for heaven's sake. Had they ever seen her with a child? She didn't know that blonde boy with blue eyes so very much like her own. After all, she did have many cousins scattered about, and a thief was a thief, even if he were blood kin, some fifth or sixth distant relative. And that grandmother, if she caught him, the worst possible punishment. Dawn came up quickly, faint, shrilled by a cock's-crow. The sun lingered reluctantly on the horizon. Soon it would be too late to go. The morning train would pass on by the depot, and we needed several hours' head start before the grandmother opened the bedroom door and found us gone. Would she send out a search party, notify the police? Or would she, more likely, just let us go, glad at last to be rid of us? Despairing, I ascended the stairs to the attic to stare outside. Foggy, cold day. Last week's snow lay in patches here and there. A dull, mysterious day that seemed incapable of bringing us joy or freedom. I heard that rooster cockle-doodle-doo again. It sounded muffled and far away, as I silently prayed that whatever Chris was doing and wherever he was, he heard it too, and would put some speed in his feet. I remember, oh, how I remember that chilly early morning when Chris stole back into our room. Lying beside Carrie, I was tentatively on the edge of fretful sleep, so it was easy for me to bolt widely awake when the locked door to our room opened. I'd lain there fully dressed, ready to go, waiting, even in the fitful dreams that came and went, for Chris to come back and save us all. Just inside the door, Chris hesitated, his glazed eyes staring over at me. Then he drifted in my direction, in no great hurry as he should be. All the while I could only stare at the pillowcases, one inside the other, so flat, so empty-looking. "Where are the jewels?" I cried. "Why did you stay so long? Look out the windows, the sun is rising. We'll never make it to the train depot on time." My voice turned hard, accusing, angry. "You turned chivalrous again, didn't you? That's why you've come back without Mama's precious jewelry." He had reached the bed by this time, and he just stood there with the flat, empty pillowcases hanging from his hand. "Gone," he said dully. "All the jewelry was gone." "Gone?" I asked sharply, sure he was lying, covering up, still unwilling to take what his mother so cherished. Then I looked at his eyes. "Gone? Chris, the jewelry is always there. And what's the matter with you, anyway? Why do you look so queer?" He sagged down on his knees beside the bed, gone boneless and limp as his head drooped forward and his face nestled down on my breast. Then he began to sob. Dear God, what had gone wrong? Why was he crying? It's terrible to hear a man cry, and I thought of him as a man now, not a boy. My arms held him, my hands caressed and stroked his hair, his cheeks, his arms, his back, and then I kissed him, all in an effort to soothe whatever awful thing had happened. I did what I had seen our mother do for him in times of distress, and intuitively I had no fears that his passions would be aroused into wanting more than just what I was willing to give. Actually, I had to force him to talk, to explain. He choked off his sobs and swallowed them. He wiped away the tears and dried his face with the edge of the sheet. Then he turned his head so he could stare at those horrible paintings depicting hell and all its torment. His phrases came broken, disjointed, stopped often by sobs he had to hold back. This was the way he told it, while on his knees beside my bed, while I held his shaky hands, and his body trembled, and his blue eyes were dark and bleak, warning me I was about to be shocked. Forewarned as I was, I still wasn't prepared for what I heard. "Well," he began, breathing hard, "I realized that something was different the second I stepped into her suite of rooms. I beamed my flashlight around without turning on a lamp, and I just couldn't believe it. The irony of it, the hateful, despicable bitterness of making our move too late. Gone, Kathy. Mama and her husband have gone. Not just to some neighbor's party, but really gone. They had taken with them all those little mementos that made their rooms personal. The trinkets gone from the dresser, the gewgaws from that dressing table, the creams, lotions, powders, and perfumes, everything that once was there gone. Nothing was on her dressing table. It made me so mad I ran about like someone demented, dashing from here to there, pulling open drawers and ransacking them, hoping to find something of value that we could pawn, and I didn't find anything. Oh, they did a very good job. Not even the little porcelain pillbox was left, or one of those heavy Venetian glass paperweights that cost a fortune. I ran into the dressing room and yanked open all the drawers. Sure, she had left some things, junk of no value to us or anyone, lipsticks, cold creams, and stuff like that. Then I pulled open that special bottom drawer. You know, the one she told us about a long time ago, never thinking we'd be the ones to steal from her? I pulled that drawer all the way out like you have to and set it aside on the floor. Then I felt in back for the tiny little button you have to push in a certain combination of numbers, her birthday numbers, or else she would herself forget the combination. Remember how she laughed when she told us that? The secret compartment sprang open, and there were the velvet trays where dozens of rings should have been fitted into small slots, and there wasn't a ring there, not one. And the bracelets, necklaces, and earrings gone. Every last thing was gone, Kathy. Even that tiara you tried on. Oh, golly, you don't know how I felt. So many times you pleaded with me to take just one little ring, and I wouldn't because I believed in her. Don't cry again, Chris, I begged, when he choked up and he put his face down on my chest again. You didn't know she'd go, not so soon after Corey's death. Yeah, she grieves a lot, doesn't she? He asked bitterly, and my fingers twined in his hair. Really, Kathy, he went on, I lost all control. I ran from closet to closet and threw out the winter clothes, and soon found all the summer clothes were gone, along with 2 sets of their fine luggage. I emptied shoe boxes and rifled the closet drawers and looked for the tin of coins he keeps, but he'd taken that too, or hidden it away in a better place. I searched everything and everywhere, feeling frantic. I even considered taking one of the huge lamps, but I hefted one and it weighed a ton. She'd left her mink coats, and I thought about stealing one of those, but you'd tried them on and all were too large. and someone on the outside would be suspicious if an adolescent girl was wearing a too large coat of mink. The fur stoles were gone, and if I took one of the full-length fur coats, it would fill all of one suitcase, and then we wouldn't have room for our own things, and the paintings I might be able to sell, and we'd need what clothes we have. Really, I almost tore out my hair. I was that desperate to find something of value, for how would we ever manage without enough money? You know, at that minute when I stood in the middle of her room and thought about our situation and Carrie's poor health, it didn't matter a damn to me then whether or not I became a doctor. All I wanted was to get us out of here. Then, just when it seemed I wasn't going to find anything to steal, I looked in the lower drawer of the nightstand. I'd never checked that drawer before, and in it, Kathy, was a silver-framed photograph of Daddy, and their marriage license, and a small velvet box of green. Kathy, inside that little green velvet box, inside, was Mama's wedding band and her engagement diamond, the ones our father gave her. It hurt to think she would take everything and leave his photograph as valueless and the 2 rings he'd given her. And then the strangest thought fleeted through my mind. Maybe she knew who was stealing the money from her room, and she left those things there deliberately. No, I scoffed, tossing that gracious consideration away. She just doesn't care about him any more. She has her Bart. Regardless, I was grateful to find something, so the sack isn't as empty as it may appear. We've got Daddy's photograph and her rings, but it's going to take an awful, unbearable crisis to make me pawn either of those rings. I heard the warning in his voice, and it didn't sound the least sincere like it should have. It was as if he was putting on an act of being the same old trusting Christopher Doll who saw good in everyone. Go on. What happened next? For he'd stayed away so long, what he'd just told me wouldn't have taken all the night. I figured if I couldn't rob our mother, then I would go on to the grandmother's room and rob her. Oh, my God, I thought, he didn't. He couldn't have. And yet what perfect revenge. You know she has jewels, lots of rings on her fingers, and that damn diamond brooch she wears every day of her life as part of her uniform. Plus she has those diamonds and rubies we saw her wear at the Christmas party. And, of course, I figured she had more loot to be taken as well. So I stole down all the long, dark halls, and I tiptoed right up to the grandmother's closed door. Oh, the nerve to do that! I would never... A thin line of yellow light showed underneath to warn me she was still awake. That made me bitter, for she should have been asleep. And under less driven circumstances, that light would have made me stay my hand and act less foolhardy than I did. Or maybe you could call it audacious, now that you're planning on being a woman of words one day after you've been a woman of action. Chris, don't meander from the subject. Go on. Tell me what crazy thing you did. If I had been you, I would have turned around and come straight back here. Well, I am not you, Catherine Doll. I am me. I used some caution and very carefully eased open her door just a slot, though I feared every second it would creak or squeak and give me away. But someone keeps the hinges well oiled, and I put an eye to the crack without fear of her being alerted, and I peered inside. You saw her naked, I interrupted. No, he answered impatiently, annoyed. I didn't see her naked, and I'm glad I didn't. She was in the bed under the covers, sitting up and wearing a long-sleeved nightgown of some heavy material, and it had a collar and was buttoned down the front to her waist. But I did catch her naked in a small way. You know that steel blue hair we hate so much? It wasn't on her head. It was perched crookedly on a dummy head on her nightstand, as if she wanted the reassurance of having it near in case of an emergency during the night. She wears a wig? I asked in total astonishment, though I should have known. Anybody who persistently took their hair and skinned it back from their face so tightly would sooner or later go bald. Yeah, you bet she wears a wig. And that hair she had on during the Christmas party, that must have been a wig, too. What hair she's got left on her head is sparse and yellow-white, and there are wide pink places on her scalp with no hair at all but short baby fuzz. She had rimless glasses perched on the end of that long nose, and you know we've never seen her with glasses on.
Her thin lips were pursed up in a disapproving line as she moved her eyes slowly from line to line of the large black book she was holding, the Bible, of course. There she sat, reading of harlots and other wicked deeds, enough to put a terrible frown on her face. And as I watched, knowing I couldn't steal from her now, she laid aside the Bible and marked the place with a postcard, then put the Bible on the nightstand, then left the bed and knelt beside it. She bowed her head, templed her fingers under her chin, just the way we do, and she said silent prayers that lasted and lasted. Then she spoke aloud. "Forgive me, Lord, for all my sins. I've always done what I thought best, and if I made mistakes, please believe I thought I was doing right. May I forever find grace in thine eyes. Amen." She crawled back into bed, and then she reached to turn out the lamp. I stood in the hall and wondered what to do. I just couldn't come back to you empty-handed, for I hope we never have to pawn the rings our father gave our mother. He continued, and now his hands were in my hair, cupping my head. "I went to that main rotunda, where the chest is near the staircase, and found our grandfather's room. I didn't know if I would have the nerve to open his door and face up to that man who lies perpetually dying year after year. But this was my only chance, and I would make the most of it. Come what may, I raced down the stairs noiselessly like a real thief, carrying my pillowcase sack. I saw the big rich room, so grand and fine, and I wondered, just as you have wondered, how it would be to grow up in a house like this one. I wondered how it felt to be waited on by many servants and catered to hand and foot. Oh, Kathy, it is one beautiful house, and the furniture must have been imported from palaces. It looks too fragile to sit on and too lovely to feel comfortable with. And there are original oil paintings, I know them when I see them, and sculptures and busts, mostly on top of pedestals, and rich Persian rugs and Oriental rugs. And, of course, I knew the way to the library, since you had asked so darn many questions of Mama. And you know what, Kathy? I was darn glad you had asked so many questions, or else I may well have gotten lost. There's so many halls that shoot off right and left from the center stem. But it was easy enough to get to the library. A long, dark, really immense room, and it was quiet as a graveyard. The ceiling must have been 20 feet high. The shelves went all the way up, and there was a little stairway of iron that curved to a second level, and a balcony where you could reach books on that level. And on the lower level were 2 wooden ladders that slid along railings put there for that very purpose. Never have I seen so many books in a private home. No wonder the books Mama brought us had never been missed, though when I looked carefully I could see the gaping spaces, like teeth missing in the long rows of leather-bound, gold-tooled, hub-spined, expensive books. A desk was there, dark and massive, must have weighed a ton, and a tall leather swivel chair was behind it, and I could just picture our grandfather sitting there, issuing orders right and left, and using the phones on his desk. There were 6 telephones, Kathy, 6. Though when I checked, thinking I might have use for them, they were all disconnected. To the left of the desk was a row of tall, narrow windows that looked out on a private garden, a really spectacular view, even at night. There was a dark mahogany filing system made to look like fine furniture. 2 very long, soft, tan-colored sofas were set out from the walls about 3 feet, giving you plenty of room to move behind them. Chairs were placed near the fireplace, and of course there was a batch of tables and chairs and things to stumble against, and an awful lot of bric-a-brac. I sighed, for he was telling me so much of what I'd longed to hear, and yet I kept waiting for that terrible thing that kept me on edge, waiting for the knife to plunge. I thought that money could be hidden in that desk. I used my flashlight and set about pulling open each drawer. They were all unlocked. And it was no wonder, because they were all empty, completely empty. This sort of threw me, for why have a desk if you don't keep it full of junk? Important papers you lock away in a bank vault or your own private vault. You don't leave them in locked desk drawers that a clever thief could force open. All those empty drawers without rubber bands, paper clips, pencils, pens, notepads, and other sorts of odds and ends. Why have a desk if not for this? You just don't know the suspicions that jumped into my thoughts. And that's when I made up my mind. I could look across the long library and see the door to our grandfather's room. Slowly I headed that way. I was going to see him at last, face to face with the detested grandfather, who was also our half-uncle. I pictured our encounter. He'd be on the bed, sick but hard and still mean and cold as ice. I'd kick open the door, switch on the light, and he'd see me. He'd gasp. He'd recognize me. He'd have to know who I was. Just one look and he'd know. And I'd say, "Here I am, grandfather, the grandson you never wanted to be born. Upstairs in a locked bedroom of the northern wing I have 2 sisters. And once I had a younger brother, but he's dead now, and you helped kill him." All that was in my mind, though I doubt who would really have said any of it. Although you, no doubt, would have screamed it out, just as Carrie would have if she had the words to express herself, which you do. Still, maybe I would have said them, just for the joy of watching him wince. Or maybe he would have shown sorrow, or grief, or pity, or more likely fierce indignation that we were living at all. I know this, I couldn't stand another minute of being kept a prisoner and having Carrie pass away like Corrie did. I held my breath. Oh, the nerve of him to face up to the detested grandfather, even if he was still lying on his deathbed, and that solid copper coffin was still waiting for him to fill it. I was waiting breathlessly for what came next. I turned the knob very cautiously, planning on taking him by surprise, and then I felt ashamed to be so timid, and I thought I would act boldly, and I lifted my foot and kicked open that door. It was so dark in there I couldn't see a damn thing, and I didn't want to use the flashlight. I reached inside the door and felt around for a wall switch, but I couldn't find one. I beamed the flashlight straight ahead and saw a hospital bed, painted white. I stared and stared, for I was seeing something I hadn't expected to see. The blue and white striped ticking of the mattress that was doubled over on itself. Empty bed. Empty room. No dying grandfather there, gasping out his last breaths and connected up to all kinds of machines to keep him alive. It was like a punch in the stomach, Kathy, not to see him there when I'd prepared myself to meet him. In a corner, not too far from the bed, was a walking cane, and not so far from the cane was that shiny wheelchair we'd seen him in. It still looked new. He must not have used it often. There was only one piece of furniture besides 2 chairs, and that was a single dresser, and not one item was on the top. No brush, comb, nothing. The room was as neat as the suite of rooms Mama had left, only this was a simple, plain room with panelled walls. And the grandfather's sick room had the feeling of not being used for a long, long time. The air was stale, musty. Dust was on the dresser top. I ran about looking for something of value we could hawk later on. Nothing. Again, nothing. I was so full of angry frustration that I dashed back into the library and sought out that special landscape painting Mama told us covered a wall safe. Now, you know how many times we've watched thieves on TV open wall safes, and it seemed to me perfectly simple when you knew how. All you had to do was put your ear to the combination lock and turn it slowly, slowly, and listen carefully for the betraying clicks and count them, I thought. Then you would know the numbers and dial them correctly, and next, voila, the safe would open. I interrupted. But grandfather, why wasn't he on the bed? He went on as if I hadn't spoken. There I was, listening, hearing the clicks. I thought if I lucked out and the steel safe did open, it too would be empty. And you know what happened, Kathy? I heard the betraying clicks that told me the combination. Ha-ha! I couldn't count fast enough. Nevertheless, I took the chance of turning the top wheel of the lock, thinking I just might, by happenstance, come up with the right choice of numbers in the right sequence. The safe door didn't open. I heard the clicks, and I didn't understand. Encyclopedias don't give you good lessons on how to become a thief. That must come naturally. Then I looked about for something slim and strong to insert into the lock, hoping maybe I could trip a spring that would open the door. Kathy, that was when I heard footsteps. Oh, hell and damnation, I swore, frustrated for him. Right. I quickly ducked behind one of the sofas and fell flat on my stomach. And that's when I remembered I'd left my flashlight in the grandfather's small room. Oh, dear God! Right. My goose was cooked, so I thought. But I lay perfectly still and quiet, and into the library strolled a man and a woman. She spoke first and had a sweet, girlish voice. "John," she said, "I swear I'm not just hearing things. I did hear noises coming from this room." "You're always hearing something," complained a heavy, guttural voice. It was John, the butler with the bald head. And the bickering pair made a half-hearted search of the library, then the small bedroom beyond, and I held my breath waiting for them to discover my flashlight, but for some reason they didn't. I suspect it was because John didn't want to look at anything but that woman. Just as I was about to get up and make my move to leave the library, they came back, and so help me God, they fell down on the very sofa I was hiding behind. I put my head down on my folded arms and prepared for a nap, guessing you'd be on edge up here, wondering why I didn't come back. But since you were locked in, I didn't fear you'd come looking for me. It's a good thing I didn't go to sleep. Why? Let me tell it in my own way, Kathy, please. "See," said John, as they came back to the library and sat on the sofa, "didn't I tell you nobody'd be in there or in here?" He sounded smug, pleased with himself. "Really, Livy," he went on, "you're so damn nervous all the time, it takes the pleasure out of this." "But, John," she said, "I did hear something." "Like I said before," John answered, "you hear too much of what ain't there. Hell's bells, just this morning you were speaking of mice in the attic again and how noisy they are." John chuckled then, a soft and low chuckle, and he must have done something to that pretty girl to send her into peals of silly giggles, and if she was protesting, she didn't do a good job of it. Then that John, he murmured, "That old bitch is killing all the little mice in the attic. She carries up to them food in a picnic basket, enough food to kill a whole German army of mice." You know, I heard Chris say that, and I didn't think anything unusual. That's how dumb I was, how innocent and still trusting. Chris cleared his throat before he continued. "I got a queer feeling in my stomach, and my heart began to make so much noise I thought that couple on the sofa would surely hear." "Yeah," said Livy, "she's a mean, hard old woman, and to tell you the truth, I always took to the old man better. At least he knew how to smile. But her, she don't know how. Time and time again, I come in this room to clean up, and I find her in his room, and she's just standing there staring at his empty bed, and she's got this queer little tight smile that I take for gloating because he's dead and she's outlived him, and now she's free and don't have nobody riding her back and telling her not to do this and don't do that and jump when I speak. God, sometimes I wonder how she stood him and he stood her, but now that he's dead, she's got his money." "Yeah, sure she's got some," said John. "She's got her own money that her family left her. But her daughter, she's got all the millions old Malcolm Neil Foxworth left." "Well," said Livy, "that old witch, she don't need no more. Don't blame the old man for leaving his entire estate to his daughter. She put up with a lot of mess from him, making her wait on him hand and foot when he had nurses to hand him things. Still he treated her like some slave. But now she's free too and married to that handsome young husband, and she's still young and beautiful and with loads of money. Wonder what it would feel like to be her. Some people, they get all the luck. Me, I never had any." "What about me, Livy, honey? You got me, at least until the next pretty face comes along." And there I was behind the sofa, hearing all of this and feeling numb with shock. I felt ready to throw up, but I lay very quiet and listened to that couple on the sofa talk on and on. I wanted to get up and run fast to you and Carrie and take you out of this place before it was too late, but there I was, caught. If I moved, they'd see me. And that John, he's related to our grandmother, third cousin, so Mama said. Not that I think a third cousin matters one way or another, but apparently that John has our grandmother's confidence, or else she wouldn't allow him so much freedom to use her cars. You've seen him, Kathy, the bald-headed man who wears livery. Sure, I knew who he meant, but I could only lie there feeling my own sort of numb shock that made me speechless. "So," Chris went on in that deadly monotone that didn't show that he was concerned, frightened, surprised, while I hid behind the sofa and put my head down on my arms and closed my eyes and tried to make my heart stop beating so damn loud. John and the maid began to get really serious with each other. I heard their little movements as he began to take off her clothes and she began to work on his clothes. "They undressed each other?" I asked. "She actually helped him off with his clothes?" "It sounded to me that way," he said flatly. "She didn't scream or protest?" "Heck no, she was all for it. And by golly, it took them so everlastingly long. Oh, the noises they made, Kathy, you wouldn't believe it. She moaned and screamed and gasped and panted, and he grunted like a stuck pig. But I guess he must have been pretty good at it, for she shrieked at the end like someone gone crazy. Then, when it was over, they had to lie and smoke cigarettes and gossip about what goes on in this house. And believe me, there's little they don't know. And then they made love a second time." "Twice in the same night?" "It's possible to do." "Chris, why do you sound so funny?" He hesitated, pulled away a bit, and studied my face. "Kathy, weren't you listening? I went to a great deal of pains to tell you everything just as it happened. Didn't you hear?" "Hear?" Sure, I'd heard everything. He'd waited too long to rob Mama of her hoard of hard-won jewelry. He should have been taking a little all along, like I'd begged him to do. So Mama and her husband were off on another vacation. What kind of news was that? They were always coming and going. They'd do anything to escape this house, and I can't say I blamed them. Weren't we prepared to do the same thing?" I screwed up my brows and gave Chris a long, questioning look. Obviously, he knew something he wasn't telling me. He was still protecting her. He still loved her. "Kathy," he began, his voice jagged and torn. "It's all right, Chris. I'm not blaming you. So our dear, sweet, kind, loving mother and her handsome young husband have gone off on another vacation and taken all the jewelry with them. We'll still get by. Say goodbye to security in the outside world, but we were still going. We'd work. We'd find a way to support ourselves and pay doctors to make Carrie well again. Never mind about jewelry. Never mind about the callousness of our mother's act to leave us without explaining where she was going and when she was coming back. By now we were accustomed to ugly, harsh, thoughtless indifference. Why so many tears, Chris? Why so many?" "Kathy," he raged, turning his tear-streaked face to lock his eyes with mine. "Why aren't you listening and reacting? Where are your ears? Did you hear what I said? Our grandfather is dead. He's been dead for almost a year." Maybe I hadn't been truly listening, not carefully enough. Maybe his distress had kept me from hearing everything. Now it hit me fully for the first time. If the grandfather was truly dead, this was stunning good news. Now Mama would inherit. We'd be rich. She'd unlock the door. She'd set us free. Now we didn't have to run away. Other thoughts came flooding, a torrent of devastating questions. Mama hadn't told us when her father died. When she knew how long these years had been for us, why had she kept us in the dark, waiting always? Why? Bewildered, confused, I didn't know which emotion to feel. Happy, glad, sorry. A strange, paralyzing fear settled the indecision. "Kathy," whispered Chris. Though why he bothered to whisper, I don't know. Carrie wouldn't hear. Her world was set apart from ours. Carrie was suspended between life and death, leaning more toward Corey every moment. She starved herself and abandoned the will to live on without her other half. Our mother deceived us deliberately, Kathy. Her father died, and months later his will was read, and all the while she kept quiet and left us here to wait and rot. 9 months ago, we would all have been 9 months healthier. Corey would be alive today if Mama had let us out the day her father died, or even the day after the will was read. Overwhelmed, I fell into the deep well of betrayal Mama had dug to drown us. I began to cry. "Save your tears for later," said Chris, who had just cried himself. "You haven't heard everything. There's more, much more, and worse." More? What more could he tell me? Our mother was proven a liar and a cheat, a thief who'd stolen our youth and killed Corey in the process of acquiring a fortune she didn't want to share with children she no longer wanted or loved. Oh, how well she explained to us what to expect that night when she gave us our little litany to say when we were unhappy. Did she know or guess way back then that she would become the thing the grandfather would make of her? I toppled over into Chris's arms and lay against his chest. "Don't tell me any more. I've heard enough. Don't make me hate her more." "Hate? You haven't begun to know what hate is yet. But before I tell you the rest, keep in mind we are leaving this place no matter what. We will go on to Florida just like we planned. We'll live in the sunshine and make our lives the very best we can. Not for one moment are we going to feel ashamed of what we are or what we've done, for what we've shared between us is so small compared to what our mother has done. Even if you die before I do, I'll remember our lives up here and in the attic. I'll see us dancing beneath the paper flowers, with you so graceful and me so clumsy. I'll smell the dust and the rotting wood, and I'll remember it as perfume sweet as roses, because without you it would have been so bleak and so empty. You've given me my first taste of what love can be. We're going to change. We're going to throw out what's worst in us and keep what's best. But come hell or high water, we three will stick together, all for one, one for all. We're going to grow, Kathy, physically, mentally, and emotionally. Not only that, we're going to reach the goals we've set for ourselves. I'll be the best damned doctor the world's ever known, and you will make Pavlova seem like an awkward country girl. I grew weary of hearing talk of love and what the future held, possibly, when we were still behind a locked door, and death was lying beside me, curled up in fetal position with small hands, praying even in sleep. All right, Chris. You've given me a breather. I'm prepared for anything. And thank you for saying all of that and for loving me, for you haven't gone unloved or unadmired yourself. I kissed him quickly on the lips and told him to go on, to hit me with his knockout blow. Really, Chris, I know you must have something perfectly awful to tell me, so out with it. Keep holding me as you tell me, and I can stand anything you have to say. How young I was, how unimaginative, and how confidently presuming. Chapter 22. The last chapter. Endings, beginnings. Guess what she told them, Chris continued on. Name the reason she gave for not wanting this room cleaned on the last Friday of the month. How could I guess? I'd need a mind like hers. I shook my head. So long ago the servants had stopped coming to this room, I'd forgotten those first horrible weeks. Mice, Kathy, Chris said, his blue eyes cold, hard. Mice. Hundreds of mice in the attic our grandmother invented, clever little mice that used the stairs to steal down to the second floor. Devilish little mice that forced her to lock this door, leaving in the room food covered over with arsenic. I listened and thought that an ingenious, marvelous story for keeping the servants away. The attic was full of mice. They did use the stairs. Arsenic is white, Kathy. White. When mixed with powdered sugar, you cannot taste its bitterness. My brain went spinning. Powdered sugar on the 4 daily doughnuts, one for each of us. Now only 3 in the basket. But, Chris, your story doesn't make any sense. Why would the grandmother poison us bit by bit? Why not give us a sufficient amount to kill us immediately and have done with it? His long fingers went through my hair to cup my head between his palms. He spoke in a low voice. Think back to a certain old movie we saw on TV. Remember that pretty woman who would keep house for older gentlemen, rich gentlemen, of course, and when she'd won their trust and affection, and they had written her into their wills, each day she fed them just a little arsenic. When you digest just a fraction of arsenic each day, it is slowly absorbed by your entire system, and each day the victim feels a little worse, but not too much so. The small headaches, stomach upsets that can easily be explained away, so that when the victim dies, say in a hospital, he already is thin, anemic, and has a long history of illnesses, hay fever, colds, and so forth, and doctors don't suspect poisoning, not when the victim has all the manifestations of pneumonia or just plain old age, as was the case in that movie. "Corey," I gasped. "Corey died of arsenic poisoning? Mama said it was pneumonia that killed him." "Can't she tell us anything she wants? How do we know when she's telling the truth? Maybe she didn't even take him to a hospital. And if she did, obviously the doctors didn't suspect any unnatural cause of death, or else she'd be in jail by now." "But, Chris," I objected, "Mama wouldn't allow the grandmother to feed us poison. I know she wants that money, and I know she doesn't love us now as she did once, but still she would never kill us." Chris turned aside his head. "Okay, we've got to make a test. We're going to feed Corey's pet mouse a bit of powdered sugar donut." "No, not Mickey. You trusted and loved us. We couldn't do that." Corey had adored the little gray mouse. "Chris, let's catch another mouse, a wild one that doesn't trust us." "Come on, Kathy. Mickey is an old mouse and lame, too. It's hard to catch a mouse alive, you know that. How many have lived after the cheese was nibbled on? And when we leave, Mickey won't survive. When we set him free, he's a pet now, dependent on us." "But I was planning on taking him with us." "Look at it this way, Kathy. Corey's dead, and he hadn't even begun to live. If the donuts aren't poisonous, Mickey will live, and we can take him with us if you insist. One thing for certain, we have to know. For Carrie's sake, we've got to be positive. Look at her. Can't you see she's dying too? Day by day, she's losing ground. And so are we." On 3 well legs, he came staggering to us, dragging the lame leg, our sweet little gray mouse that nibbled trustingly on Chris's finger before he bit into the donut. He took a small piece and ate it trustingly, believing in us, his gods, his parents, his friends. It hurt to watch. He didn't die, not right away. He grew slow, listless, apathetic. Later on he had small fits of pain that made him whimper. In several hours he was on his back, stiff, cold, pink toes curled up into claws, small black bead eyes sunken and dull. So now we knew, for sure. God hadn't taken Corey. "We could put the mouse in a paper sack along with 2 of the donuts and take it to the police," said Chris tentatively, keeping his eyes averted from mine. "They'd put the grandmother in jail." "Yeah," he said, and then turned his back. "Chris, you're holding something back. What is it?" "Later, after we've gone. Right now I've said all I can say without throwing up. We'll leave early tomorrow morning," he said when I didn't speak. He caught both my hands in his and squeezed them tightly. "As soon as possible we'll get Carrie to a doctor, and ourselves too." Such a long day to live through. We had everything ready, and nothing to do but stare at the TV for the last time. With Carrie in the corner and the 2 of us on separate beds, we watched our favorite soap opera. When it was over, I said, "Chris, soap people are like us. They seldom go outdoors. And when they do, we only hear about it, never see it. They loll about in living rooms, bedrooms, sit in the kitchens and sip coffee or stand up and drink martinis, but never, never go outside before our eyes. And whenever something good happens, whenever they think they're finally going to be happy, some catastrophe comes along to dash their hopes." Somehow I sensed someone else in the room. My breath pulled in. There stood the grandmother. Something in her stance, in her cruel, hard, grey stone eyes, showed her mocking, scornful contempt, and informed me she'd been there for some time. She spoke, her voice cold. "How sophisticated the 2 of you have grown while locked away from the world. You think you jokingly exaggerated the way life is, but you didn't exaggerate. You forecast it correctly. Nothing ever works out the way you think it will. In the end, you are always disappointed." Chris and I stared at her, both chilled. The hidden sun took a nosedive into night. She'd had her say, so she left, blocking the door behind her. We sat on our separate beds, with Carrie slouched over near the corner. "Kathy, don't look so defeated. She was only trying to put us down again. Maybe nothing did work out right for her, but that doesn't mean we are doomed. Let's go forth tomorrow with no great expectations of finding perfection. Then, expecting only a small share of happiness, we won't be disappointed. If a little hill of happiness would satisfy Chris, good for him. But after all these years of striving, hoping, dreaming, longing, I wanted a mountain high. A hill wasn't enough. From this day forward, I vowed to myself I was in control of my life. Not fate, not God, not even Chris was ever again going to tell me what to do or dominate me in any way. From this day forward, I was my own person, to take what I would when I would, and I would answer only to myself. I'd been kept prisoner, held captive by greed. I'd been betrayed, deceived, lied to, used, poisoned. But all that was over now. I had been barely 12 years old when Mama led us through the dense piney woods on a starry, moonlit night, just on the verge of becoming a woman. And in these 3 years and almost 5 months, I'd reached maturity. I was older than the mountains outside. The wisdom of the attic was in my bones, etched on my brain, part of my flesh. The Bible said, as Chris quoted one memorable day, there was a time for everything. I figured my time for happiness was just ahead, waiting for me. Where was that fragile, golden, fair Dresden doll I used to be? Gone. Gone like porcelain turned into steel, made into someone who would always get what she wanted no matter who or what stood in her way. I turned my resolved gaze on Carrie, who slumped in the corner, her head so low her long hair covered her face. Only 8.5 years old, but she was so weak she shuffled like someone old. She didn't eat or speak. She didn't play with the sweet little baby who lived in the dollhouse. When I asked if she wanted to take along a few of those dolls, she kept on hanging her head. Not even Carrie, with her stubborn, defiant ways, would defeat me now. There was no one anywhere, much less an 8-year-old, who could resist the strength of my will now. I strode over and picked her up, and though she fought weakly, her efforts to free herself were fruitless. I sat down at the table and forced food into her mouth and made her swallow when she would spit it out. I held a glass of milk to her lips, and though she clamped those lips together, I pried them apart and forced her to swallow the milk too. She cried out that I was mean. I carried her into the bathroom and used tissue when she refused even to do that. In the tub, I shampooed her hair. Then I dressed her in several layers of warm clothing, just as I dressed myself. And when her hair was dry, I brushed it until it shone and looked somewhat like it used to look, only far thinner and less glorious. All through the long hours of waiting, I held Carrie in my arms, whispering to her of the plans Chris and I had for our future, the happy lives we'd live in the golden, liquid sunshine of Florida. Chris was in the rocker, fully clothed, and was strumming idly on Corrie's guitar. "Dance, ballerina, dance," he softly chanted, and his singing voice wasn't bad at all. Maybe we could work as musicians, a trio, if Carrie ever recovered enough to want a voice again. On my wrist was a 14-carat gold watch, made in Switzerland, that must have cost Mama several $100, and Chris had his watch too. We weren't penniless. We had the guitar, the banjo, Chris's Polaroid camera, and his many watercolors to sell, and the rings our father had given our mother. Tomorrow morning held escape for us. But why did I keep thinking I was overlooking something very important? Then suddenly I realized something both Chris and I had ignored. If the grandmother could open our locked door and stand quietly for so long before we noticed her, had she done this on other occasions? If she had, she might now know of our plans. She might have made her own plans to prevent our escape. I looked over at Chris, wondering if I should bring this up. He couldn't hesitate this time and find a reason to stay, so I voiced my suspicion. He kept picking on the guitar, apparently not disturbed in the least. "The minute I saw her there, that thought flashed into my mind," he said. "I know she puts a great deal of trust in that butler, John, and she might very well have him waiting at the bottom of the stairs to prevent us from leaving. Let him try. Nothing and no one are going to stop us from leaving early tomorrow morning." But the thoughts of the grandmother and her butler waiting at the bottom of the steps wouldn't go away and leave me in peace. Leaving Carrie on the bed asleep, leaving Chris in the rocker and strumming the guitar, I wandered up to the attic to say goodbye. Directly under the dangling light bulb, I stood and looked around. My thoughts went flashing back to the first day we came up here. I saw us, all four, holding hands, staring around, overwhelmed by the gargantuan attic and its ghostly furniture and clutter of dusty junk. I saw Chris up high, risking his life to hang 2 swings for Carrie and Corey to use. I ambled into the schoolroom, looking at the old desks where the twins had sat to learn to read and write. I didn't glance at the stained, smelly mattress to picture us sunbathing there. That mattress put other memories in my head. I stared at the flowers with sparkling centers, and the lopsided snail, the menacing purple worm, the signs Chris and I had lettered, and through all the maze of our gardens and jungle, I saw myself dancing alone, always alone, except when Chris stood in the shadows watching, making his ache my ache. For when I waltzed with Chris, I'd made him someone else. He called up the stairs, "It's time to go, Kathy." Quickly I raced back to the schoolroom. On the blackboard I wrote very large using white chalk, "We lived in the attic. Christopher, Corey, Carrie, and me. Now there are only 3. I signed my name and wrote down the date. In my heart I knew that the ghosts of the 4 of us would override all other ghosts of children shut away in an attic schoolroom. I left an enigma for someone in the future to unwind. With Mickey in a paper sack, along with 2 poisoned doughnuts stored in Chris's pocket, he used that wooden key and opened our prison door for the last time. We'd fight to the death if the grandmother and the butler were below. Chris carried the 2 suitcases filled with our clothes and other possessions, and over his shoulder he slung both Corey's beloved guitar and his banjo. He led the way down all the dim halls to the back stairs. Carrie was in my arms, partially asleep. She weighed but a bit more than she had the night we'd taken her up these same stairs more than 3 years ago. Those 2 suitcases my brother carried were the very same ones Mama had been burdened with on that terrible night so long ago, when we were young, so loving and trusting. Pinned inside our clothes were 2 small bags holding bills stolen from Mama's room, divided equally just in case something unforeseen separated Chris from me. Then neither of us would be left penniless. And Carrie was sure to be with one of us and taken care of. In the 2 suitcases were the heavy coins, also put into 2 bags to weigh them evenly. Both Chris and I were very much aware of what lay waiting for us on the outside. We hadn't looked at so much TV without learning the worldly and heartless lie in wait for the naive and innocent. We were young and vulnerable, weak, half sick, but no longer naive or innocent. My heart stood still as I waited for Chris to unlock the back door, fearful every second someone would stop us. He stepped out, smiling back at me. It was cold outside. Patches of snow lay melting on the ground. Soon enough the snow would fly again. The grey sky above foreboded that. Still, it was no colder than in the attic. The earth felt mushy beneath our feet. Strange feeling after walking so many years on hard, level wooden floors. I was not yet feeling safe, for John could follow, take us back, or try to. I raised my head to sniff the clean, sharp mountain air. It was like sparkling wine to make one drunk. For a short way I kept Carrie in my arms, then I set her on her feet. She wobbled uncertainly, stared around, disoriented and bedazed-looking. She sniffled, swiped at her reddening nose, so small and finely shaped. Oh, was she going to catch cold so soon? "Kathy!" called back Chris. "You two have to hurry. We don't have much time, and it's a long, long way. Pick up Carrie when she tires." I caught her small hand and pulled her along. "Take deep, long breaths, Carrie. Before you know it, the fresh air, good food, and sunshine will have you feeling strong and well again." Her small, pale face tilted upward to mine. Was that hope sparking her eyes at last? "Are we going to meet Corey?" The first question she'd asked since that tragic day when we learned Corey had died. I gazed down at her, knowing her deepest yearning was for Corey. I couldn't say no. I just couldn't put out that flicker of hope. "Corey is in a far, far place from here. Didn't you listen when I said I saw Daddy in a beautiful garden? Didn't you hear when I said Daddy took Corey up into his arms and now Daddy is taking care of him? They're waiting for us, and someday we'll see them again, but not for a long, long time." "But, Kathy," she complained, puckering her faint brows, "Corey won't like that garden if I'm not there, and if he comes back looking for us, he won't know where we are." Earnestness like that put tears in my eyes. I picked her up and tried to hold her, but she struggled free to drag her feet and hang back, twisting halfway around so she could stare back at the huge house we were leaving. "Come, Carrie, walk faster. Corey's watching us. He wants us to escape. He's down on his knees praying we'll get away before the grandmother sends someone to take us back and lock us up again." Down all the winding trails we tagged along behind Chris, who set a very fast pace. And just as I knew he would, he led us unerringly to the same little train depot that was only a tin roof supported by 4 wooden posts with a rickety green bench. The rim of the dawning sun peeked over a mountain top, chasing away the low morning mists. The sky turned lavender rose as we drew nearer the depot. "Hurry, Kathy!" called Chris. "If we miss this train, we'll have to wait until 4 o'clock. Oh, God, we couldn't miss this train. If we did, the grandmother might for sure have time to catch us again." We saw a mail truck with a tall broom-straw man standing near 3 mailbags on the ground. He took off his cap, displaying a Brillo pad of reddish hair. Genially, he smiled in our direction. "You folks are sure up early," he called to us cheerfully. "On your way to Charlottesville?" "Yup, on our way to Charlottesville," answered Chris, as with relief he put the 2 suitcases down. "Pretty little girl you got there," said the tall mailman, sweeping his pitying gaze over Carrie, who clung fearfully to my skirt. "But if you don't mind my saying so, she seems kind of peaked." "She's been sick," Chris confirmed, "but soon she'll be better." The mailman nodded, seemingly believing this prognosis. "Got tickets?" "Got money?" Then Chris added sagaciously, practicing for less reliable strangers, "but just enough to pay for the tickets." "Well, get it out, son, 'cause here comes the 5:45. As we rode on that morning train headed toward Charlottesville, we saw the Foxworth mansion sitting high on the hillside. Chris and I couldn't take our eyes from it, couldn't help but stare at our prison from the outside. Especially we fixed our gazes on the attic windows with the closed black shutters. Then my attention was drawn to the northern wing, riveted on that end room on the 2nd floor. I nudged Chris as the heavy draperies parted and the shadowy, distant form of a large old woman appeared there, staring out, looking for us, then vanished. Of course she could see the train, but we knew she couldn't see us. just as we'd never been able to see the passengers. Nevertheless, Chris and I slipped down lower on our seat. "Wonder what she's doing up there so early," I whispered to Chris. "Usually she doesn't carry up our food until 6:30. He laughed, sounding bitter. "Oh, just another of her efforts to catch us doing something sinful and forbidden." Maybe so, but I wanted to know her thoughts, her feelings when she entered that room and found it empty, and the clothes gone from the closet and the drawers, and no voices or steps overhead to come running, if she called. In Charlottesville, we bought bus tickets to Sarasota, and were told we had 2 hours to wait for the next Greyhound heading south. 2 hours in which John could jump into a black limousine and overtake that slow train. "Don't think about it," said Chris. "You don't know that he knows about us. She'd be a fool to tell him, though he's probably snoop enough to find out." We thought the best way to keep him from finding us if he was sent to follow would be to keep on the move. We stored our 2 suitcases and the guitar and banjo in a rented locker. Hand in hand, Carrie in the middle, we strolled the main streets of that city, where we knew the servants of Foxworth Hall came to visit relatives on their day off, and to shop, go to the movies, or pleasure themselves in other ways. And if this were Thursday, we'd have really been fearful, but it was Sunday. We must have looked like visitors from another planet in our ill-fitting, bulky clothes, our sneakers, our clumsily cut hair, and our pale faces. But no one really stared, as I feared they would. We were accepted as just a part of the human race and no odder than most. It felt good to be back in crowds of people, each face different. "Wonder where everyone's going in such a hurry?" asked Chris, just when I was speculating on the same thing. We stopped on a corner, undecided. Corey was supposed to be buried not far from here. Oh, so much I wanted to go and find his grave and put flowers there. On another day, we'd come back with yellow roses, and we'd kneel and say prayers whether or not it did any good. For now we had to get far, far away and not endanger Carrie more, out of Virginia, before we took her to a doctor. It was then that Chris took the paper sack with the dead mouse and the powdered sugar doughnuts from his jacket pocket. His solemn eyes met mine. Loosely he held that bag in front of me, studying my expression, asking with his eyes, "An eye for an eye?" That paper sack represented so much. All our lost years, the lost education, the playmates and friends, and the days we could have known laughter instead of tears. In that bag were all our frustrations, humiliations, tons of loneliness, plus the punishments and disappointments. And most of all, that bag represented the loss of Corey. "We can go to the police and tell our story," said Christopher, while he kept his eyes averted. "And the city will provide for you and Carrie, and you won't have to run. You two might be put in foster homes or an orphanage. As for me, I don't know." Chris never talked to me while he kept his eyes elsewhere unless he was hiding something. That special something that had to wait until we were outside of Foxworth Hall. "Okay, Chris, we've escaped, so out with it. What is it you keep holding back?" His head bowed down as Carrie moved closer and clung to my skirt, though her eyes were wide with fascination as she watched the heavy flow of traffic and the many people hurrying by, some who smiled at her. "It's Mama," Chris said in a low voice. "Recall when she said she'd do anything to win back her father's approval so she could inherit? I don't know what he made her promise, but I did overhear the servants talking. Kathy, a few days before our grandfather died, he had a codicil added to his will. It states that if our mother is ever proven to have given birth to children by her first husband, she will have to forfeit everything she inherits and return everything she's bought with the money, including her clothes, jewels, investments, everything. And that's not all. He even had it written in that if she has children by her second marriage, she will lose everything too. And Mama thought he had forgiven her. He didn't forgive or forget. He would keep on punishing her from his grave." My eyes widened with shock as I added up the pieces. "You mean Mama? It was Mama, and not the grandmother? He shrugged as if indifferent when I knew he couldn't be. I heard that old woman praying by her bed. She's evil, but I doubt she would put poison on the doughnuts herself. She would carry them up to us and know we ate the sweets, when all along she warned us not to eat them. But, Chris, it couldn't have been Mama. She was on her honeymoon when the doughnuts started coming daily. His smile came bitter, wry. Yeah, but 9 months ago the will was read. 9 months ago Mama was back. Only Mama benefits from the grandfather's will, not our grandmother. She has her own money. She only brought up the baskets each day. So many questions I had to ask. But there was Carrie, clinging to me, staring up at me. I didn't want her to know Corey had died from any but natural reasons. It was then Chris put the bag with the evidence in my hands. It's up to you to decide. You and your intuition were right all along. If I'd have listened, Corey would be alive today. There is no hate such as that born out of love betrayed, and my brain screamed out for revenge. Yes, I wanted to see Mama and the grandmother locked up in jail, put behind bars, convicted of premeditated murder. 4 counts if intentions were counted too. They'd be only grey mice in cages shut up like us, only they'd have the benefit of being in the company of drug addicts, prostitutes, and other killers like themselves. Their clothes would be of grey prison cotton. No trips twice a week to the beauty salon for Mama. No makeup, no professional manicures, and a shower once a week. She'd even lose the privacy of her most personal body places. Oh, she'd suffer, without furs to wear and jewelry and warm cruises in southern waters when the winter rolled around. There wouldn't be a handsome, adoring young husband to romp with in a grand swan bed. I stared up at the sky where God was supposed to be. Could I let him in his own ways balance the scales and take the burden of justice from me? I thought it cruel, unfair that Chris should put all the burden of decision on my shoulders. Why? Was it because he would forgive her for anything, even the death of Corey and her efforts to kill all of us? Would he reason that such parents as hers could pressure her into doing anything, even murder? Was there enough money in the whole world to make me kill my 4 children? Pictures flashed in my mind, taking me back to the days before my father died. I saw us all in the back garden, laughing and happy. I saw us at the beach, sailing, swimming, or in the mountains, skiing. And I saw Mama in the kitchen doing her best to cook meals to please us all. Yeah, surely her parents would know all the ways to kill her love for us. They'd know. Or was Chris thinking, as I was, that if we went to the police and told our story, our faces would be splashed on the front pages of every newspaper in the country? Would the glare of publicity make up for what we'd lose? Our privacy, our need to stay together? Could we lose each other just to get even? I glanced up at the sky again. God, he didn't write the scripts for the puny little players down here. We wrote them ourselves. With each day we lived, each word we spoke, each thought we etched on our brains. And Mama had written her script, too, and a sorry one it was. Once she'd had 4 children she considered perfect in every way. Now she had none. Once she had 4 children who loved her and considered her perfect in every way. Now she had none who saw her as perfect. Nor would she ever want to have others. Love for what money could buy would keep her forever faithful to that cruel codicil in her father's will. Mama would grow old. Her husband was years younger. She'd have time to feel lonely and wish she'd done it all differently. If her arms never ached to hold me again, they'd ache for Chris and maybe Carrie, and most certainly she'd want those babies that would be ours one day. From this city we'd flee southward on a bus to make of ourselves somebodies. When we saw Mama again, and to be certain fate would arrange it that way, we'd look her straight in the eyes and turn our backs. Into the nearest green trash can I dropped the bag, saying goodbye to Mickey and asking him to please forgive us for what we did. "Come on, Kathy," called Chris, stretching forth his hand. "What's done is done. Say goodbye to the past and hello to the future. And we're wasting time when already we've wasted enough. We've got everything ahead waiting for us." Just the right words to make me feel real, alive, free enough to forget thoughts of revenge. I laughed and spun about to run back to where I could put my hand in his, stretched ready and waiting. With his free arm, Chris swooped down to pick up Carrie, and he hugged her close and kissed her wan cheek. "Did you hear all of that, Carrie? We are on our way to where the flowers bloom all through the winter. In fact, flowers bloom all year long down there. Does that make you want to smile?" A tiny smile came and went on pale lips that seemed to have forgotten how to smile, but that was enough for now. Epilogue. It is with relief that I end the telling of our foundation years on which we were to base the rest of our lives. After we escaped Foxworth Hall, we made our way and managed somehow to always keep striving toward our goals. Our lives were always to be tempestuous, but it taught both Chris and me that we were survivors. For Carrie it was far different. She had to be persuaded to want a life without Corey, even when she was surrounded by roses. But how we managed to survive, that's another story. This concludes the reading of Flowers in the Attic by V.C. Andrews. This book was read by Donaida Peters.